on house?
I'm golden.
Okay. Anybody else need this?
I read them again before I put my name on them, so.
Do you need a pen?
Do you need a pen?
I have pens.
Okay, thank you. Okay, welcome everybody to the Tuesday, April the 9th regular meeting of the Nelson City Council. I'd like to call the meeting to order and acknowledge that the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Ktunaxa, the Syilx, and the Sinixt people, and is home to the Métis and many diverse Aboriginal persons. We honor their connection to the land and rivers and respect the importance of the environment to our strength as a community. Is there any late items? Seeing none, if I could have adoption of the agenda as presented. Moved by Councillor Woodward, seconded by Councillor Payne. All those in favor? And that carries. And I should just note that Councillor Page is not well, and so he has chosen to stay at home, which is a good call. He's got a very bad cold, and so I said thank you for making the decision to stay at home, and he's really worn out, so he's not coming in remotely. So today, our educational session workshop is on records management. And for those who don't know her, but I'm sure everybody around the table here knows Lisa Matchett. She's been with the City of Nelson for over 15 years now, because I just recently gave her 15-year certificate for being an employee here at the City of Nelson. She's worked in a number of departments over her time here, and she is now our records management coordinator. And I know that we've seen a few very interesting, remember one city Facebook post I think I saw of you with miles of, it's like carpeting of maps rolled out down the hallways of City Hall. And so she's here to give council an update regarding the digitalization project. So over to you, Lisa.
Thank you, Mayor Morrison. Hello, everybody. So I'll just jump right into it here. I'll start off a 5-year timeline that I've prepared, and you'll see it's kind of hard to see on the screen, but the records management department started in 2022. So we have a 5-year plan to digitize records within the City of Nelson, ending in 2027. And in 2027, we hope to be 90% paperless. And you might say or ask, why not 100%? Because there's still value in paper. We still need wet signatures for things like council minutes. We still need wet signatures on paper for bylaws. But we all know how technology is rapidly advancing, and AI is a big part of our picture now and in our day-to-day work. So that may change by 2027. So let's just go back to the beginning of 2022. Records and Information Management Department was established. Sarah Winton is the head of our small little department, herself and myself. And we chose Development Services to be the pilot department, and they had almost 4,000 property plans, almost 4,000 property files, and almost 800 property plans that needed to be scanned and digitized. They are legacy, thank you, Chris. They are legacy files of the city that need to be kept in perpetuity, that belong to the city. They're vital records. And so that was a big project. We sent those away to get scanned. They were not scanned in-house. So that was quite an extensive project. And the other part of the impetus of the project was to network with other municipalities. What are you doing? Municipalities our size. What are you doing? How are you getting digitized? And what tools are you using? And what I found was that most municipalities were in the same boat that we were. They were also researching software. I did an extensive research program with IT as to, hey, how can we get this moving a little bit faster, a little bit quicker to digitize the City of Nelson? So IT and I, we collaborated together with software companies, took a lot of demos, and we realized we're not quite there yet. We don't want to pull the trigger on something that's really expensive, and that's what we found software companies to be, is really expensive. And you need to subscribe to them yearly, which is, you know, a costly endeavor, and we have a limited budget within records management. So the other part of the commencement of the records management department was that there was a lot of paper. And there was a lot of paper that hadn't been touched in a really long time. And a lot of that paper had already met its retention periods, and there's various retention periods for various different categories and departments and subject matter. So it was a deep dive into what do we do with all of this paper. And it was kind of all over the building. So what we did was we created an archive section in the basement of City Hall. Our former archive department or area was a building, an annex building outside, which is now a parking lot. But the roof of that building was, the integrity of it was shot, so we had to move all of that paper somewhere within this building. So we began to move all of that paper into the basement of City Hall. There's a map. There's designated areas, and it's the most fireproof, secure area in the city. So that's where all of that stuff lives now. So, and there's one thing to touch on with the records management retention of disposing of records. I can't stress it more enough that we seem to be over retaining our records, and it's just because of a lack of awareness of the information that we have. However, that being said, we can get into a lot of trouble legally by over retaining our records. I took a webinar recently that an American company just got fined $5.5 million for over retaining their records, and we certainly don't want to be in that position. It also, if we ever go to court and need to provide documents that we're over retaining, it incurs extra legal costs. It provides outdated misinformation, and we don't want to be in that scenario. So we really have to adhere to our retention schedules, and we're working on that. And so in October of 2023, last year, about 6 months ago, Sarah and I had a virtual meeting with some consultants saying, okay, we know what we know so far with records management. I know what I know, Sarah knows what she knows. Well, what are the next steps? Can you provide us with some information? And maybe is there a magic bullet with some software that we could purchase and get our records off the ground? And they had a bunch of questions for us. They asked us, do you guys have does the city of Nelson have a scanning policy? Do you have a disposal policy? Do you have a destruction authorization policy? Do you have a records management bylaw? The answer to all of that was no, we don't. So they said, don't go and do what other municipalities are doing right now and buying software. You're going to be in trouble. Make sure you have these policies, make sure you have your bylaw, make sure that you adhere to them, and put the work in first before you start getting ahead of yourself, putting the cart before the horse. So there is a package coming to council shortly within the next few months with all of this information, along with a 5-year roadmap to get us to that 90% paperless operational workload. So we put the halt on the software purchase. IT strongly agreed with us and said, yeah, we're definitely not ready. We'd be going into the weeds if we did that. And the other thing that we need to do is to create a City of Nelson Records Management Manual. We have a guideline that we follow through the LGMA. It's a records retention manual it's a guideline that we follow, but we need one that's specific to the City of Nelson, and that's one that I'm working on right now. For instance, their piers aren't in this manual, and we all know that we're renovating a pier that we have. There's all sorts of things that are specific to the City of Nelson that we need to create in a records retention schedule so that we follow it, and we do due diligence legally and financially and operationally. Okay, next slide. Okay, so then the second half of this year, there's more work that we need to do on policies, and one of them is information governance. And information governance is exactly that. It's how we govern our information with policy, with security through IT, and financially how we deal with things. We have to. It's an overarching throughout the organization of how we deal with records and records management. And also towards the end of this year, we're going to be meeting with department heads and supervisors and roll out training to each department by department and in person, to say this is how, when you're constructing a document, this is the numbering convention you give it, this is the retention schedule you give it, and file it electronically. Don't file it paper. Unless it starts as paper, keep it as paper. But if it's born digital, keep it digital, keep it paperless. We want to get towards that 90% paperless. And then in the final 2 years of our 5-year digitization plan, this is where IT really comes up to. They've become my best friends at the city of Nelson so far. They're great. So we want to upgrade our Microsoft software license from it's a business basic right now to a business premium, and this will move the city to a more cloud infrastructure. This is really where we want to go. And then at this point, all city departments will then transition to SharePoint, and we'll begin. IT will come in and bring us up to speed with SharePoint training. There are things that we can't quite cross over to SharePoint, and that's things like AutoCAD and our GIS system. Those are things that just, they don't marry well now, but who's to say that they won't marry well tomorrow, right? With the advent of technology and how fast it's moving. And this is where, after getting the city into all departments into SharePoint, after all the training, and this is where we can pull the trigger to get that software to align all records with retention schedules, so you don't have someone like me picking through electronic versions and through paper versions and disposing of them. This way it'll make it more streamlined and more efficient and cost saving for people, and just so much more easier to retrieve information at the press of a button, rather than digging and digging and digging for things. And then hopefully by this time in 2027, we'll be at 90% or greater towards digitization. And questions?
Thank you, Lisa. So, questions, Councilor Woodward.
Thank you, through the chair. So obviously this is all headed towards being in the cloud. So how do we make sure that we have total control over that information, right? Being it's so sensitive, so much information in there.
Yes.
Do we have like multiple server copies, or how does it work?
So that's something definitely more IT related. And I do know so Sarah and I meet monthly with Nathan, who's head of IT, and Chris Jury's on that meeting as well too. So, and I know Nathan could speak probably better to the question that you have. But I know our security, we're really amping that up right now. I can't provide a more diverse answer on that right now, but yeah, I know security's at the paramount of our organization right now.
Sorry.
Yes.
I guess my worry is, like, let's say there was some catastrophic thing happened where we lost the cloud or something. Like, could we access the information in another form, or would there be a copy on a local server?
I do believe that there would be backups as far as, and that's one of the, an upcoming policy is to have a backup policy, as well as getting into information governance. That's another policy that's coming as well. And within information governance is security within IT, and secure backup is part of that too, to ensure that we have that. Heaven forbid, we don't want to lose it electronically.
All this work.
Can I just speak to that?
If I can bounce back just to, at the beginning of this project, we shipped all those documents off to a place called Microcom in Burnaby, with Development Services being the pilot department. It was a vital endeavor that we had to do because they are legacy documents. It was an extremely costly endeavor. I mean, it was pallets and pallets of information that got shipped off. And the one reason that we did is because they could do it expeditiously, and they could also do it adhering to our scanning standards that we have to follow as per the province's requirements. There's technical standards that we have to follow. That being said, I had a conversation with Sarah and said, you know what, we have a whole bunch more legacy documents. We have minute books in the basement since 1899 that have not been scanned. Heaven forbid we turn into a situation where we all know about Lytton burning to the ground. They didn't preserve any of their information digitally. So we don't want that to happen. So we've hired a casual, we purchased the scanner at a fraction of the cost of what it costs to get everything shipped and scanned with Microcom. So I think we're ahead of the game. We hired a casual, so she's almost got all of those minute books done, and the archives at Touchstones is willing to take those documents and they can keep them in their humid controlled room, and they're kept in perpetuity in paper and also digitally. And there's also things like the bylaws. We need to get those scanned. There's a large volume of vital records, agreements, that are very important to the city of Nelson.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sarah, just before Sarah wanted to.
I just want to speak to the security piece. So we're looking in the future. We don't quite know what is going to be the acceptable way to keep digital documents. So it might be in the cloud, it might be SharePoint, it might be some other avenue. We don't really know. We do know that right now we have a network, and we keep all of our final documents on that network. So not only at this point, we think they would be in SharePoint, they would also be stored in the R drive. So there's the cloud, but there's also something that we call our network, which is really just a big box, right? But at least we would have duplication of the final documents.
Thank you.
Okay.
Just add, one of the, as council knows, one of the other initiative is, cybersecurity, and we're moving on that front as well. And part of that is how do you recover, whether that's from, a ransomware attack or whatever. And, all I've heard is, the best defense is to be able to restore and restore your systems as quickly as possible. So whether that data is on the cloud or elsewhere, part of that strategy will, how do we, get back into business as soon as possible. And so we'll certainly be addressing, where our data is and how do we get that back and restore and get back into business. So it's being looked at sort of at multiple ways to make sure that that does happen.
Thank you.
Councillor Tate, you had a question.
Thanks very much. Question to finance. I saw on one of the slides that we'll be upgrading Microsoft. I imagine that's going to be a huge cost increase. I know it was at the RDCK. It went from like some amount per year to $50 per month per user. Is that in our 5-year financial plan already?
Yeah, I don't think we've mapped all that out yet.
Yeah.
And, come up with those costs. So yeah, we don't sort of have anything earmarked for that yet, and when that would be. Yeah.
Okay.
And what solution we end up ultimately going with, right? It's all part of this kind of plan with records management and IT to try and figure out the best solutions. So not quite there yet.
Councillor Lockwood.
I mean, part of the idea for doing this is increasing efficiency, right? Like, so that we should gain back in productivity whatever we pay for in additional fees. I'm hoping we're sort of keeping track of that so that we're not.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
yeah. And actually, I can speak to it, reflecting on Mayor Morrison's comment. When I first started here in this department 15 years ago, when we had that annex building, and Kevin would say to me, Lisa, could you go, and I do remember this, can you go please retrieve some files on the boundary expansion? And it was like, and everybody was too busy. There was no records management really at the time. Everyone just
this was all pretty much new. So I would go in there, and I'm not kidding, it was floor to ceiling boxes, and it was just a matter of digging through things, finding stuff, and, you know, making order out of chaos and retrieving what I could. And there was a lot of time spent. So even from that point up until now, we're saving. I can guarantee that we're more at a touch of a button at this point in time than we were 10 years ago, for sure, certainly.
Yeah, and just, you know, related is we just had the first kickoff meeting on our GIS business case study, and you know, certainly a big part of that, you know, they were showing what, you know, GIS, you know, applications they have in other municipalities. So, you know, all these property files that Lisa was just talking about, you know, now you can go into that GIS, that will be the front, sort of that portal into all your documents. So, you know, you click on someone's address and all those documents that relate to that property will all be accessible at that one click of the button. So all these databases that we build will be linked through to that address, and we'll be able to, you know, right now we're searching, you know, fire has their records, you know, development services has their records, Public Works has their records. So, you know, that's eventually, you know, these things will dovetail into, you know, that powerful piece of software, and then just the applications that go on top of it. You know, they were showing, you know, do you want to know, you know, every tree that you have in your parks, every whatever. So all those things will start to, you know, as you build the, you know, you have to have the records behind it. And that's what we're doing with this digitization. But the application, you know, at this stage looks like it will be GIS, and all that information will be really, whether you're out in the field or wherever, will be a touch of a, you know, a screen to, you know, access all that data. And I can tell you from paper records, the interesting thing, we're, you know, having some of these really historical things going back to the 1940s and prior, whether it's, you know, with Nelson Hydro, et cetera. And, you know, actually back in the day when we did paper filing and we actually had a clerk that actually did filing, those records are current, they're ordered, they're whatever. Today's world, you have 20 different people working on, you know, different parts. There's 32 copies of each thing. It's, you know, hard to know which is, you know, the final, the current, the whatever. That, you know, the thing about computerization, you just gave this ability to, you know, the whole organization, and just, you know, just even, you know, how do you name that file? Is it actually, do we put it under Nelson Hydro or agreements or whatever? So, so that's part of this project. And related to that, you know, one of the things we have been doing some work on AI as well, and have done some workshops with our staff and identifying early projects. And one that came to mind for me was, you know, like this is a complicated system, and you got, like I said, 100 different individuals choosing where to file something. And, you know, we're looking at, you know, can we use AI to say this is where you would file it, and have that consistent, where, you know, use that technology. So I'm not filing under my sort of feeling of how things should be filing, Chris a different way, and Lisa a third way, you know, starting to use those tools. So
Absolutely, yeah. There's a lot of subjectivity as to where people think something should be filed.
Yeah.
And there's actually a correct way to, a correct numbering convention under the subject, and a retention schedule that gets applied to it, because, yeah, it can go really widespread really fast.
yeah, and that's a tool we say, I should just be able to ask AI, where should I file this, right? So, yeah, lots of lots of things starting to
Lots of layers,
kinda
lots
align,
of
I
work,
think.
but yeah, we're ambitious to get there, for sure.
Can I also just add, I think that one slide that you had was quite important, that you know, meeting with the departments, meeting with the department heads, kind of talking about, I think the process part is very important.
Absolutely.
The software is there, but we're mailing out, you know, water and sewer notices to folks, and they could go paperless, but we're kind kind of stuck at that 22% mark. If we're still mailing out water and sewer notices and property tax notices to 4,500 people each time.
Right.
If we're doing DocuSign or Adobe Sign and people receive it in their email and then they still print it out and sign it and send it to Lisa to process, you know, those kinds of things. It's like, where's the low-hanging fruit of like volumes of paper? And let's kind of change the process and the mindset and the thinking, and the software, you know, kind of follow, but
Yes.
you need to get the process in place.
And the good news story coming out of development services, like dealing with all of that paper, and I was doing weekly meetings with development services as to what they're doing now and their processes now, and what the province is implementing now as to what you can accept. Our development services department does no longer accepts paper plans of any form. It's all digital. We're looking at hoping to get digital signatures happening in the near future with that department too. So we're getting there. It's definitely not a sprint. It's definitely a marathon, but you know, we're in it for the long haul and we'll get there. We're determined and we're sure of it.
That's great. Thank you, Lisa. Any
Thank you.
further questions, councillors? Rick?
You just need to hide the printer or or charge people. Dock your
Yeah.
pay. Every time you print, you lose $1.
It's a revenue charge, yeah.
Yeah, Sort of think like, you know what, we talk about the records, I mean, and obviously we need to have them organized, but I have to say that one of the things of having kept all these records for a long period of time is, I look back on a few things that we've gone through here, and some of them are still in cameras, we can't mention those ones, but BCUC, and going through all of that when we were doing the COSA, the fact that we had records, the paper records, really well organized when it was a paper system, were vital to being able to look at that. They've been vital in our negotiations about our water licenses, because we have all of those documents. So, you know, paper did serve its purpose, and I think
Absolutely.
that I would agree. I never even thought about it, but when I hear that, oh, what do we file it under? And I'm sort of thinking, oh yeah, everybody has an idea what file that piece of paper should go into, and I can see perhaps using the AI is, you might be able to drag me into the 21st century. I'll be kicking and screaming all the way. I know when we tried to go paperless at the hospital, it's still not paperless in healthcare. And as a matter of fact, I would say we generate way more paper now because of risk management than I've ever seen generated in my career. So, you know, keep pushing us forward, Lisa.
We'll get there.
Yeah. Thank you for your time today. That's
Thank
great.
you very
So
much for
everybody's
your
got the
time.
update. We look forward to
That's
the next one.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, and if we could just step back to item number 5 on the agenda. I just thought it'd be nice to let Lisa do her presentation. And if I could have an adoption of the minutes of the previous meeting of January the 9th, 2024. Moved by Councillor Woodward, seconded by Councillor Tate. All those in favor? And that carries. Thank you. Moving on to item 7, City Manager, any report today?
And I think Chris also has a few things just project-wise where we're at with some of these initiatives. As I mentioned, we've had an AI workshop with a number of our staff. There's actually quite a bit of enthusiasm there to figure out how we use this in the city of Nelson, and I think we all see a ton of potential there. We are already using it pretty extensively in communications and in our HR department, and we started to identify, what are some of those low-hanging fruit per se, and as I said, something like records management, if we can, because that's one of the things I was concerned about. If as we digitize these other records, if we just keep filing things incorrectly as we go along, we just keep trying to re-catch up to what we have. So, I think we just need to try to get in front of that and start at least filing things in the right places. So, we don't need Lisa afterwards to have to go in and clean up all those files. So, I think that's an area that we looked at. Obviously, corporate services, and another area, bylaws, RFDs. Once we train it to write a RFD and do all that thing, then staff reports, etc. We see a lot of use of that. So that's super exciting, and we're going to come up with sort of what the strategy is to advance that. Couple other IT things, as I mentioned, GIS. We had the kickoff workshop, so we've the consultants in place. It's about a 5-month process, and before we'll come back to council with that fully laid out business plan. It will address both GIS and NG 911 from a data point of view, addressing. So that's an exciting and large project. It's, when they were showing me all these things, all these various layers, etc., that it's doing, it seems a little overwhelming at this stage, but as we talk to them, we need to walk before we run. And then we're just in the process of, I guess we're down to negotiating with the preferred vendor on NG 911. So that is another large IT project that's underway as well. And I also mentioned cybersecurity. So we are actually implementing a number of initiatives there, including staff training on cybersecurity, what you should be doing and shouldn't be doing. I have all these new terms that I've learned and forgot already, but I'll keep at it. I think I'm 700 points or something on my score. I think I was up to 70-80. I lost 10 somehow. I'm not sure how. Anyway, so that's underway with all our staff. Other than that, I will turn it over to Chris. There's a number of sort of, things that are larger projects that are ongoing there as well.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. I think we had a couple of quiet meetings where there wasn't a whole bunch for updates, and it seems like we're catching up here and got a quite a numbered update on. First, I'll just start out quickly with some of the staffing pieces that we have. I'm not sure that I can't recall if we announced it, but Natalie Andrzej-Janczyk is going to be our Director of Community Planning and Climate going forward. So that's a really positive outcome for us. Really excited that she's able to slide into that. With that move, our senior planner position that Natalie's vacating will be posted. So really exciting news on that front. As well, our senior climate and energy specialist, just to keep you all abreast where we're at, that we're in the shortlisting process there. Had some really great applicants looking at that, so going through that process. From an operational side of things, tis the spring, as you can all see out there. A couple of the major things that we're looking at that everyone's always curious about, and we're going to speak a little bit more about right now, but getting Baker Street open for the patios. I wanted to provide a bit of context on this because, the start date is always May 1st for them to be ready. Everybody's always excited to get started earlier, especially when the weather turns nice outside. And, just to provide some context about what our crews are actually doing that we need till that May 1st. So this year, as an example, we're really trying to get caught up on a lot of the cement repairs, sidewalk repairs that are out there. So you'll have seen our crews working and smoothing out all the cracks in areas where it's lifted and stuff like that, try and reduce tripping hazards. So that's something that, I think we had a couple of longer winters, and when the winter stretches on longer in the spring, we don't have as much of a window to do that stuff. So that kind of builds up over years, and then when a year like this happens, we're able to really get after it and do a lot of that stuff. So that's really one of the major things that are going on now. And then, of course, the flushing program, which started in the last couple of weeks, sweeping and flushing program that we'll come in and clean that out for. So we'll be talking more around that on the patios this evening. I believe it's on the agenda. But just operationally, there is, this is our opportunity to kind of buff up some of the infrastructure along Baker Street now to get ready for our true busy season down there. So that's one of the main things in operations. We'll be throughout throughout the city doing all the street sweeping and flushing that'll also be occurring. As well, anybody who's been down to Lakeside lately will note that we are working on the bocce courts there to sort of finish up that deal with the Nelson hoops and the basketball court that went in place of the old bocce courts. So another project we're working on there. As far as getting into or continuing on the sort of getting into the capital side of the projects, anybody who's been to Gyro lately will note that the bridge is in. So that bridge, just so everybody's aware, you'll look at it and it'll seem like, boy, it seems like, small children would fit through the sort of sides of the bridge. So the deal with that bridge is it was not custom made for us. We actually found that a great deal. It was already made and sitting in someone's yard that, a manufacturer's yard that would fit that span. And so we have to build some railings leading up to the bridge on either side anyways for safety. And we're going to continue that look through the bridge because as it stands, you have the railing that goes across and it's like, consistent W's and that offers a lot of space for, little humans to fit through. So we are going to be cleaning that up, but it's nice that we got the bridge in and will be operational for this summer. As well, I think everybody's seen all the news reports on the Civic, and so we are ramping up that process right now. You've seen in the newspaper, I've seen they've interviewed the theater, the Senior Society, the Dance Umbrella, and Glacier Gymnastics. So just to know that roof repair project, we are working very hard at that, and that will be ongoing, kind of looking at that start point as reported in the newspaper around April 17th is really when we want to start getting in there and getting to getting us prepared to start moving to the actual repair. There's quite a bit of work that needs to be done to enable that repair to happen inside. So we are working with all of the leaseholders there to try and make it work with their programs and when all of that happens. So yeah, just know that that is an incredible amount of work that we're fitting into, with the whole goal of being out of there by October. So clicking away on that. Another thing that I wanted to make council aware of, starting next week, there will be, just because it's so front and center, currently there is, there's going to be construction work happening right out in front of the Hume by their laneway there. It's going to be like a 3-day project, but a lane will be shut down for those 3 days there as we separate a storm pipe from the sanitary. Ooh. So getting storm into storm, which is what we're always trying to do. And this has been
how exciting.
This has been never would have thought that was exciting a couple of years ago, right? But this is, something that we're pursuing throughout the city. And this is just, we kind of finally figured this one out and figured out a good plan for it. So there will be that one lane closed on Ward Street for a couple of days there. But we're working with businesses around there to make sure that they're prepared for that. And then finally, as some of you may have seen today, we have been working with URSA, URSA has been pursuing the idea of getting bear-proof garbage bins and selling them to folks out there and looking at ways to procure them. So the city offered to help them with the procurement process and as well some of the cash handling for actually paying for those. So that notification from URSA went out this morning. And apparently there's been a fair amount of interest in that. And so, yeah, we'll be working through that process. Thank you.
I don't know if people have been to Cottonwood lately, so we do have the new bridge in there. I think what the timelines, we're waiting to, we graded it and waiting to pave here.
Yep.
Fairly soon.
Yep. So yes. So those that have been down to, the bridge was installed about 6 weeks ago, eight weeks ago, something like that. It's still closed off. There's some paving required at the apron on either side of the bridge. So what happened was we put the bridge in, and then the engineer identified that it's actually got positive drainage, meaning that all the water goes onto the bridge, which ultimately rots out a wood bridge. So then we had to regrade our lot to get negative drainage, is what it's referred to as. So that on the west side of Cottonwood Creek, going towards Castlegar, on the other side of that bridge, that's the city-owned lot that's there. So that was all graded. The laneway was graded there to provide that positive drainage to the lane. And so then now we're just waiting for asphalt to pave both sides of the apron on the bridge, and then that laneway to make sure, silica lane as it's called, to make sure that we're good to go for market season. So the asphalt provider has just fired up the plant here in the last week. They're starting out with some small patches, and then we're hoping to get them in there in the next few weeks.
Yeah. And I think if you've been there, you'll see the grade up to Lakeside is Lakeside Drive? No.
Railway?
Railway, yeah. You know, that grade coming out of that lane is so much better now with this regrading. It used to be quite a steep getting out of there, and that lot is, is certainly in position for council to make a decision what we want to do with that lot. It was always envisioned to, have housing down there, so it's set up well for that in the future as well. And I don't know if there's any questions on the infamous sewage leak that we had, and do you want to clarify that?
This is just from the reports I read in the newspaper. It sounded like there was a rubber gasket that basically was dislodged. What caused that?
Difficult to say exactly what caused it. I think, so you're dealing underwater, right? And, obviously flow conditions, and that one was fairly deep. So likely it's something to do with the original install of that just allowed that to flap a bit, from what I understand, but that was all sort of tightened up and made sure that was solid, so.
Right.
Yeah.
And it is that pipe is near end life, yeah?
Correct, yeah. So that's all, and, I apologize, I don't know how I missed it on this list. But it's all.
I've run out of paper, so
Okay.
It's busy.
So that's all falls into the liquid waste management plan that we're working on. We had the wastewater master plan that came out in 2022 that identified the liquid, upgrades or replacement of the plant and the force main that goes along with it. So that's the technical term for that, is a force main. So we're forcing it from that lift station down there. And that all gets done through that liquid waste management plan, which is that, quasi-regulatory process that we go through with the province that ultimately, after 3 phases that typically last, 5 to 7 years, sort of at the end of that, all approvals are in place, and we can just get right on with, the sort of capital work around that. So yes, it is near end of life. It is something that we've been discussing, whether, it will actually wait for the liquid waste management plan to go through all the planning processes, or does it need to be replaced sooner? So, that's, it certainly, we are exploring all options on that front. One of the critical pieces is going to be through that liquid waste management planning process, is just identifying exactly where that future plant, whether we're going to upgrade the existing, whether we're going to put a new one there. We just have to really nail that down, because, in the 2022 report, it identified it as, I think, $9 million for replacement. So that wouldn't be something that we want to replace and then realize that we don't need it, half a dozen years from now or whatever. So
it's 3.2 kilometer of pipe.
Thereabout, yeah, which isn't, there's not a lot of advanced technology associated in that. It's about putting a pipe together and putting it in the water, right? It's just, we got to make sure that it's going to the right place. There's obviously a lot in that you're dealing with flow, and then, when it actually can go in, you're going to be looking at the best conditions and timing that with the season. So.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Councillor Tate.
I have a question. Do you guys, since you have the inside scoop on municipal liquid waste management, do you have any idea in particular why the sewer plant in North Van went from 700 million to 3 point something billion? Is it like, oh, it's because the steel manufacturing has tripled? Like, is there some kind of indicator on that? Because we're planning, and some of us have like a broad idea of the cost in Kimberley, for example. But like this one, I choked when I read it. I choked. I couldn't believe it.
Very good question to ask one of them somebody from Metro,
I know it's Metro, yeah.
when we're at UBCM.
I'm sure they love answering that question again and again. Any ideas?
And I think that's a question for them. You know,
Yeah.
what we do know is that typically, you know, because there's a lot of discussion about, you know, like moving a plant closer to town or in town, and so there you're obviously like very visible and stuff.
Yeah.
And now this, I'm not saying that this by any means accounts for this, you know, significant increase in costs, but one of the things that we do know from the liquid waste management plan, because of course there's discussions, you know, do we put liquid, you know, the plant somewhere nearer to Nelson, is, you know, what our consultant said, and they work on a lot of these, is that typically what you find is that any savings in like a shorter force main or anything like that are easily eaten up by the aspects of trying to make a sewage treatment plant palatable near your community, right?
Okay.
So that goes into like, you know, the different architecture, because you're going to want to try and make it, you know, it beautiful, because looking like a normal, you don't want to roll into Nelson and look down and be like, oh, that's obviously the sewage treatment there. As well as, you know, the way that you manage all of the sort of exhaust that comes off of that, or, you know, the smell and things like that. So, you know, I will say it doesn't account for any of, you know, the story, or it might account for some of it. I'm can't tell you. I did read that story as well and was like really interested, trying to like scan through it to understand why. And, you know, I think the story kind of tells you a bit of the reason, but one of the things that it definitely saw is you're going over the bridge and it's right there. Mm-hmm. So no doubt significant line items in that budget are associated with how visible it is, where it is, you know, whereas here I think ours is very well situated currently. You know, it's in a good location. We do have a longer force main as a result, but, you know, it seems to be, so that's something that we have understood through this liquid waste management planning process.
I had another question. I forget which northern-ish city has had all sorts of water pipe issues, and they got that big federal grant.
Rupert.
Thank you, Prince Rupert. Has there been any information from the feds about the well-managed water systems and any rewards for those?
No, we're hoping that they create some.
Yeah.
I'm just curious.
Yeah. No, we certainly identified that as, you know, depending what the urgency of this is. Yeah, I think we need to lobby hard that, you know, we're a community that actually has looked after our infrastructure, and we can't do it all. And if there's something like this that comes up unexpectedly, then we definitely need government grants. And so certainly encourage you to talk to all your elected counterparts on the federal and provincial side and start that. So, you know, I see that as a, you know, we never love, you know, poor press, but at least it gets it on senior government's radar that, you know, I don't think, you know, we believe, you know, when our media release went out, talked about 1,000 cubic meters of sewage in 36 million cubic meter flow of the river. Then you saw the headlines, 1 million liters, which is actually 36 billion liters of flow in that river. So if you want to put it in the same context, it's you know, obviously a tiny fraction of the flow of that river. But regardless, no one wants to be you know, putting raw sewage right into the lake, and we have a whole treatment plant, etc. But you know, it's aging infrastructure, and yeah, we've done a very good job of managing and planning and et cetera, and these are long-term assets, and it sits on the bottom of a lake, and you know, there's variables we can't control. So I think we should you know, we should be eligible for those grants, and you know, I agree. If a community lets their system fall apart and gets, you know, $80-100 million in grants, a community that actually maintains theirs and their own citizens have funded 90% of this, then, you know, should be rewarded.
Any other questions for Chris? And I'm gonna go to the other Chris. Do you have anything that updates?
A couple things maybe to mention. On the parking front, so we do have a preferred vendor for a mobile parking solution selected. I can't tell you who it is yet because I think we're still going through that privacy impact assessment piece. But in the coming days, we'll be able to announce something. We plan on putting out a bit of a press release because also coming up soon, where Bylaws received the equipment they need to be able to reprogram the meters, so that parking rate increase that was approved by council, it's a bit of a manual process. They have to go out to each meter and kind of reprogram that, but that'll happen around the middle of the month. So the idea is to put something out there that'll let the public know that this is what's happening with parking rates, but also a bit of that information piece on reminding people, this is where that money goes. It goes into the infrastructure, into the roads, into the sidewalks, the bike lanes, all of that kind of thing. And what the impact would be if we didn't have that revenue on taxation and that type of thing. And then also to let them know about the mobile parking solution that we hope to have in place, we plan to have in place by summer. And we'll be looking also at some of those areas that we have parking assets, but they're not being fully utilized, whether that's the parkade or down by the airport. So we'll kind of be hitting those areas as well. So that's kind of the plan for the second half of 2024 here on parking. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if we're ready to kind of bring that out yet, but just, anecdotally, I've been through there a couple of times, and I can tell you that, gone through each floor and just kind of mapped it out. In the typical day, there's between 70 and 90 spots that are just empty in the parkade. So we need to be able to open that up to allow more people to be able to use that. I think it's especially important for those folks that work downtown. They really need a solution and a place to be able to park all day. So, coming up with a rate that's reasonable and then trying to max that out so that it's full and, being fully utilized, I think is the goal.
Councillor Payne.
So that's as a result of monthly parkers not utilizing, so they're paying their
Correct.
monthly fee and just not utilizing it.
Yes, that's right.
And we don't really understand why that is. Is it the rates? Is that rate?
Yeah, I mean, it's $100 a month. Maybe you hold on to that and you think, I only work downtown a couple of days a week, but it's worth it to just kind of have that spot that I can use. So the rest of the time it's just sitting empty. And there are available spots if you go up higher to the roof. There are some spots up there that maybe people don't know about. So that's another thing that we're going to update that commuter parking guide and kind of get that sent out as well. So that'll also be coming this month.
Another question. When you said mid-month for the bylaw to be doing their thing to the parking meters, you meant mid-April this month?
Yeah, I think around the 15th, I think is
Okay,
what they were
'cause that's
saying they'd
like
be
a
ready
week.
to go. Yep.
Not even-
But we'll make sure that information goes out in advance so that people aren't
Okay.
kind of surprised.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. Sounds exciting. Thanks.
Yeah. I guess the other thing is April 2nd came and we took over the West Kootenai Transit, and the BC Transit was here over the weekend, and our guys were working over the weekend too to kind of get that transition in place. Things went really smoothly. There's always going to be these little minor things that happen, but I think in general things went really well. We've got our new transit dispatcher down there who's kind of getting up to speed on how the people coming in and booking rides and phoning up and that kind of thing, but it's been working really well so far, and she says she's got some positive feedback on the phones to her already about how great the service has been, so I think we're doing a good job so far.
Just meeting with we still have 2 contracts, one under their we're the successor for the KLW folks, drivers, and we're trying to bring those 2 collective agreements together, but it's, taken some time to do that. But certainly the feedback from the drivers is they really appreciate the more sort of hands-on approach and guidance and support that they're getting here in the city of Nelson from what they were used to. They sort of were pretty well on their own, and we're much more active in supporting our drivers, our new drivers out there on their routes. So yeah, so really positive, I think, all around so far.
Councillor Payne.
Do we have a rough idea of how many new drivers did come in? I'm just interested to understand that. Just-
Yeah, my understanding there's 18 drivers, and I don't know if that includes casuals, but now it does include.
A lot of casuals. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, 18 drivers, and how many buses? 12?
12 buses.
12 buses. Yeah.
And was it casuals because that was their preference, or that was just the way the previous operator ran the business?
Yeah, I mean, if you have drivers doing remote routes and one of them gets sick, you need somebody to be able to jump in. So you almost need a casual for every driver sometimes, right? And certain, because the bus originates out in Caslow or wherever, right? You need to have somebody there. So, but yeah, I think we could probably tighten up the scheduling and things too, and kind of create better shifts for drivers. That'll come. Yeah.
Okay, awesome.
Other than that, nothing's going on here.
And so, Corporate Officer Winton has a short report.
Thank you. I just want to let everyone know that we've hired a bylaw manager. She'll be starting on May 1st. Her name is Adriana Snashel. So I'm super excited. And then I just also want to give you a quick update on the service agreement policy. So I'm working on that. It will be, you will all see it at the May regular meeting. Yeah, so that's all.
Is that what I think that is? Is that like the 2 and 3 year plans of service to like nonprofits?
So it's going to be fairly restrictive in who is able to apply for a service agreement or speak with us about a service agreement. So there will be a bunch of criteria and parameters around who is eligible. So not for profits, you must be in a city building. Whatever the service is that they are providing the city in exchange for, say, funding, will have to be in line with council's strategic priorities. That's one of the things in the policy. So it really does sort of tighten up who can apply, and then it goes through the process of how you can apply to have one organized, and what we will provide as the city as well.
Yeah, I think the intent is just to more formalize the current agreements we have with various folks, as opposed to open it up to a broader group of folks. But, as Sarah said, here's the services that, that council can expect for the contribution that you're making towards that organization, or providing them space or whatever, so it's clear on both sides, and give them more certainty around the funding side of it. So that's the intent of that, and I think.
And just to be clear, that it won't replace a lease agreement.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But it's sort of on top of.
Right. Okay. Oh, cool. Thank you.
And I think Sarah shortchanged herself in terms of bylaw. So those bylaw officers are now working out of this building. They've been moved into some space. They've got desks and lockers and new uniforms, and a whole bunch of things had to go together to make that transition over here. And I think they're getting much more hands-on supervision and support than they had previously. Not to say that police did a really good job for many years, but they've certainly had their staffing challenges over the last few years. So so they just haven't had the chance to dedicate as much to. So lots of thanks for Sarah for really stepping up and doing this on sort of the side of the desk, and again quite a smooth transition for moving those folks. And I've talked to them a number of times, and they all seem quite happy to be here and excited to be here, and we're excited to have them here. So we're happy to welcome them to our building and providing direct services.
Councillor Woodward.
Thank you. I don't know if it'd be Kevin or Sarah, but does this mean that pressure has been released off of the police then?
Yeah. That's correct. So Sarah has taken them on fully at this stage, and that is why she's super excited about having the new bylaw manager.
Right.
Because there's a lot that goes on with bylaw, right? So
I'm just
Yeah.
wondering if that's gonna free up, like, that's a chunk that's not at the police station now,
absolutely,
that they don't have to manage.
Yep.
That they can focus on other things.
yeah. No, this definitely has created capacity at the
That's the plan.
police department. So So in
Thank you.
terms of that, there's two ways to address resourcing. One is take things off people's plate, and the other is to add more resourcing. And this is taking things off their plate and seem to add it to a different plate. But we're thankful that council supported a new bylaw officer to make that viable.
Just for clarity, so there's 3 bylaw officers currently? Okay, that was question number 1. And the question number 2 is, so the bylaw vehicle is now down here, which liberates a parking spot up. Have we expanded that for the library, who's always requesting assistance? And I feel I should know this because I only walk by there twice every single day.
Yeah.
But
That spot now is more up. I think they went back to two spots for police, and then there's 2 spots open. So that one never sort of parked because the bylaw vehicle had to be there is now gone back to police because police lost a spot as well. So
they feel they need 2 spots.
They not have a parking lot?
But it's when you go to do
Yeah.
business there. It's not, police aren't parking their cars there. It's for when you need to go and use their services, right? So, I mean, that's something we can continue to look at again as to whether or not some signage change could happen, but it has, that being down to just like sort of like one spot was, a bit tenuous for the library, so.
Yeah, and I would say that, I mean, if you're gonna do business with the police, you could just park anywhere. You don't have to park right in front of the police. You could park
Well-
in one of the spots, couldn't you?
Well, you can park other spots to go to the library as well, I guess would be an argument, but I mean, it's,
Yeah, but the library doesn't have dedicated spots that
Yeah.
restrict other people from using it.
I think
they do. They have spots in front of
They don't say for library patrons only, do they?
don't they?
You know, no,
They're 15 minutes.
They're 15-minute
the
spots.
15-minute spots to, I mean, we have had the discussion about whether or not we put signage there to say, like,
Yeah.
15 minutes
That's what
drop
they'd
off for
asked.
library. I mean, that's something that can be looked at, and I guess to a certain extent that there could be some emergent, like I don't park there when I have to go to the police station. I park somewhere down the road further, but if it's an emergency and I need to park, it's nice to know that I could pull up to the front of the police station and know that I could potentially get out of a vehicle and access the police in a timely fashion. So there probably is some logic as to why they would have a reserved spot in front of their building for.
I would just caution that with the new transit exchange, parking in that area
It's
is
gonna
at a
become,
premium.
yeah.
So if we
I can see it all being reviewed.
If we can review it,
yeah.
that'd be good.
I was gonna, that exact point, I think if I recall correctly, the mapping of that new transit exchange does kind of incorporate that parking there, so I think that might change as far as where the handicap spots are, where the library use only parking is, or 15 minutes for library use, or that kind of thing, so I think there's some changes that'll come with that.
Councillor Tate?
Just down the block for a while, and I haven't been there lately, there was often a lot of red RDCK type trucks parked
Because they
there.
have offices in the pink building,
Okay, so
so they park there all the time, not just occasionally. I mean, they've been there
All the time.
for a long time. The
Right.
fire service, the RDCK fire service trucks are often parked in that area.
I
Okay.
think they're
is
parking.
that part of
We-
the review?
Parking
Well,
permit
that'll
is
go
that they
away.
shouldn't be on that block though, if I'm
They're-
correct.
So the deal is they're first responders.
So they're
and
down
so
by
they need
workplaces.
access. Yeah, so they're in the pink building
Yeah.
and they need close access to
Their
their
vehicles.
vehicles.
Yeah.
And the pink building does not have adequate parking at all. And so the deal that we have with them is they, we work with them to allow them to park on that. Is that the 200? That's a 200 block of Victoria. Yeah. And so that's why they're always in that particular block, because they are asked to stay within there and stay out of sort of the larger commercial core area. but yeah, it's, yeah.
They're, just to be clear, they're about to lose their spots as well with the transit.
No, they're
No,
down
they're in the
next-
queue.
They're now, they're one block lower,
We'll lose
so
300.
On the one way.
potentially they're one block.
Right, okay.
They
You do
often
see them
are up
kind
in the
of-
300 though.
Yeah, quite often see them parked in the
Yeah, I do.
300 or wherever they can find a.
So
Again, that's something that, you know, being first responders and, you know, they do have to frequently respond to calls, so they do have to keep their vehicles close. And we, you know, discuss with them that very much the preference is the 200 block, but if they're in a pinch that, you know, they can slide there. But it's something that I know that Bylaw does discuss with them if they're straying too far, so.
It is in our parking bylaw, traffic bylaw, that it's in the traffic bylaw, that emergency vehicles have a parking permit. Now, I think it's just an internal discussion about where they have parking passes.
I mean, we have some time for ongoing discussions, because I mean, those will be ongoing discussions. And then I guess the question in my mind is, will emergency services still be in the pink building once all of the changes
Yep.
take place and things move around? So who knows? Who really knows what's going to be the outcome there? So, and that was it for, okay. So now we are on to, how are we doing for time? Council reports. So councillors, anybody have anything they want to report? Councillor Tate.
Thank you. I was at the All Recreation Committee at the end of March, and the new fees and charges and all of those things come out. I don't actually sit on the committee. They give me freedom of the floor, which is very kind because I show up. It was a huge meeting, and I had to leave before we got to the arena stuff, which I'm always clearly interested in. But one thing that I thought was really interesting is that, and I just want to scroll back up to it so I don't get the words wrong. The parks group, there's a parks working group, and Mark Crow is the regional parks planner. And one of the things that the RDCK is doing is engaging with a really interesting technology group that's going to help track park usage, and it has to do with cell phone data so that they know where folks are coming from and which parks are being used the most. And one of the benefits of that, just like off the top of my head, is that if a particular park gets used more than another park, then folks can know, or the RDCK can know, oh, well, that particular park needs toilet paper changed more often. Like just those kinds of things so that you can more efficiently fund and support the more used parks. So I thought it was really interesting. It's costing around $20,000 for the acquisition of these reports encompassing all regional parks and trails, but super cool technology, and I'm really excited to see how it plays out. And this is a bit of a pilot, because depending on how this data rolls out, you could really use that for your rec centers, you could use it for your library, you could use it to see who is using what when and where they're coming from, because there can be some curiosity around that and how we support one another regionally.
Did you say the name of it? Because I think that would be
for it.
particularly
Propulso.
interesting for the library.
I believe it's called Propulso. I can send you the agenda package.
Thank you.
And
You're
is it
welcome.
sophisticated enough to know I live 2 kilometers or 2 minutes outside of Nelson?
It's so sophisticated that there was quite a lot of conversation about it, but for example, they were curious about like the Trans-Canada Trail, which is right next to a park, and we don't want to accidentally catch someone who's on the Trans-Canada Trail that doesn't actually go into a regional park. And it is sophisticated enough that they can choose data points so that like within meters. Yeah.
And I guess
So interesting.
my address identifies where I live, rural or Nelson.
I'm not sure how where their data comes from. I know TELUS has similar data that they can sell to people as well. That would be really interesting for like transportation type data. But I thought that was super cool. Kudos to Mark for spearheading that. And there's a committee that's the part of the trails and water access strategy. So there's a lot of folks from the RDCK working on that to ensure that like equity in the regional parks, and it's a thing that people really value. And so it's nice to see the funding and the effort going there.
And do you get to put a charge on that person's cell phone if they're for using that park?
Like if they're all coming from Calgary, can we speak to can we talk to Nenshi and be like, listen, no, I don't know. It's more about toilet paper than charging other people. It's more
We charge for toilet paper.
Yeah, resource allocation and service.
Anyway, it was a really interesting meeting. I always like listening to our RDCK counterparts, the other councillors and the regional directors. It's good to hear their voices and what their constituents are concerned and what they're engaged in and what they care about. So I like showing up to that one.
And all recreation meetings, just for people, general awareness, are usually quarterly. They try to have them quarterly. These aren't monthly meetings. These are, all recreation is a meeting that's attended by all directors. So it's everybody around the table. It's not the subsector of a parks group and or a recreation group. It's all 20 members of the regional district at the table for all recreation, which is a paid committee of the regional district.
Sorry, one other thing that they discussed and that Trish Davison has put a lot of work into is the new access and inclusion policy framework. So spent a ton of time running different models about how to ensure equitable access for folks that have different salary levels, and ran all sorts of models, and the report is really thorough. It's like gobsmackingly wonderful about different possible methodologies and the best way to get people to find access to physical and mental health and well-being in our region. So it's great. Yep.
So it's the report, they haven't followed through on the recommendations yet. That'll be at...
I think it did pass. I think one of them passed. I forget which one.
Okay.
I don't have the minutes yet,
That's
like
okay.
the signed minutes.
I'll follow up. I'm very interested in that.
Thank you, that's all.
Okay, other councillors? Councillor Payne?
Just a couple of quick things. I mean, we haven't seen each other for 3 weeks. It's been a while, but it was March break. I did attend the Chamber of Commerce AGM, which they've split apart from their awards, which I thought was a great idea. So the awards ceremony is coming up. I'm not sure when, but it was one that I strongly recommend it to all. It was just so energizing. Last year I went after the budget meeting actually, and just to see the wealth in our community was really amazing. The AGM, it was March break, so there was a good crowd, and always great to find out what our local business community is doing, who the leaders are that are stepping up, who the people are that are, stepping back, that have supported the chamber for so long. So that was interesting. I did attend last week BC's Climate Hazard and Landscape, which was a webinar put on by UBCM for 2 hours, where every agency that has anything to do with what could go wrong and can go wrong presented those thoughts. So drought, wildfire, extreme heat, smoke, and flood. So all of the experts in all of those areas came forward. Yeah. if I'd known it was going to be a solid 2 hours, I would have arranged for something a little more recreational afterwards, but I did sit and think about it. So it was extremely valuable for me to understand what a depth of organizational effort is put together to be proactive around keeping us safe. And it was evident as everyone went through their presentations that the last few years have been sort of a, whoa, we have to up our game. And I think I saw a lot of the ways that was happening. So as much as it was very sobering, some of the possibilities, what came out of it from one of the chief meteorologists of Canada is we really don't know exactly what's coming at us until we see how much rain we get in May and June. So I think this is probably, two-eyed seeing where we have a lot of Indigenous knowledge that maybe also reflects that. And it'll be interesting to see as we go forward what happens. And I'm sure Chris Johnson has more to say around that with his depth of knowledge. The next day or the day after, I got home after an event and I went out because they were doing the controlled burn just a block from my house, which I was so excited that was happening because I've always been very concerned in August when I've seen that, 3-foot tall grass, that I know a spark from a vehicle going by could turn into a very ugly situation. And watching our fire department working together with BC Wildfire Services to do that in such a controlled, orchestrated, very powerful way, again, gave me that feeling of, there's some challenging situations that can be coming towards us, but we have teams out there doing the work, getting prepared, finding out just how to work together better, which I think is also a newer way of collaborating around all of this. So heartening and disheartening at the same time, but I think being prepared is really the only thing that we can do well, and sitting around this table, I think it's one of the things that we focus on primarily most of the time, is to make sure that as much as possible we are providing safety. So those are just some of the key things. But both of those things juxtaposed like that were really interesting to watch. Here's the, what it could look like, and here's what we're doing about it right now on the ground. So thank you to all involved in that event. And I got some great pictures and some video if you want to hear the crackle of the fires at one hill.
Yeah, and somewhat related to that, we're working with, forget what university, that's, really documenting what we have done on wildfire mitigation work around Nelson. I think we're a little bit of a poster child of the, being proactive in that space. So, kudos to a number of fire chiefs for making that happen over the years. This isn't new for us. This has been ongoing for probably 10, 15 years now in Nelson. I remember the first meetings that we had. We were up at when the Chamber of Commerce was actually down here on Hall Street, and we had a whole room full of people that were quite excited about us doing, fuel mitigation work and burns and all those sorts of things. So now it's sort of common, and to have that right in the city of Nelson and people not freaking out about it, in fact, actually doing the opposite, being appreciative of the work, is a real, a change over, those years for sure.
And if I may just add that now is the time to book your Fire Smart assessment. Call them up. They have room for you. It doesn't matter where you are, and especially now that I don't know if they've received the granting cycle, that you can get some assistance or some age-related things. When we cut down our cedar trees, that was not the case, but it was well worth it anyways. So if you do need assistance, there are some grant funding available, depending, but it's worth doing anyways. Even if you just get your report and try and do a little bit each year, you're not only protecting your own home, it's your neighbors and your community. So it's really something where we need to come together and do this work.
Sorry, I would be remiss without giving a shout out to our what do we call it, Fire Smart coordinator, to make that burn happen. We, in the end, had to produce a 40-page document to do that burn. We had to address everything from potentially noxious weeds to you name it, and it was quite a learning process and quite the rigor to actually make that happen. So real shout out to, when we put good staff in places, these things don't happen without a lot of work ahead of them.
Any other councillors? Okay, I'm just gonna be really brief because at 6 o'clock we are going into, what do you call it?
Public hearing.
Public hearing. So a couple of things is I know a number of you attended when Minister Osborne was here and hopefully took the opportunity to bend her ear on a number of things. I know she was out at the dam and was impressed out there. I had a little chat with her when she was at the Chamber of Mines, and there were some other climate initiatives on the day that she was here that council was all invited to. I was at the Chamber of Commerce AGM with Councillor Payne. I was able, last week before the executive director of Nelson Cares went away, she's away for the next month on some vacation, so it's always nice to have some vacation time. Had a good talk with her just about Nelson Cares and where they're looking for the future, and the fact that they're very keen to be looking at further developments of housing projects that fall within their mandate. So it was a really positive discussion. And of course, you know, we discussed the outside of the building here and the unfortunate closure of the hub, but always a good conversation with the executive director. One of the fun things you get to do when you're the mayor, I got to go to the Rotary Daybreak Easter egg hunt, which is just a ton of fun in the park. So just when you think things aren't looking so good, you get to go and watch little people go and collect Easter eggs. And it is really warming. It's the 11th year that the Daybreak Club has been involved with doing that. The band was down there, the samba band. When I was down there, I called them the Sambuca Band, and somebody said, I want to join that band. The Samba Band was there leading us for a little parade around the park. It was, you know, those are the really fun things, and one needs to enjoy those. I do want to talk for a moment about, so Police Board was this past week, and we talked a little bit there in the open about graffiti, but just to comment on a couple of things that were mentioned there, is that the police are monitoring graffiti. We do get the odd email come from concerned citizens about the increase in graffiti around town. And so some of the things that they ask for basically are, please report it. And so, you know, the question was, well, how do you report graffiti or whatever? So obviously, if you happen to be on the streets at 3 o'clock in the morning and you see somebody doing graffiti, you should call 911. So, because that is an emergency, so that hopefully the graffiti artist could be apprehended or talked to or whatever. So, you know, that obviously is the obvious thing, because it's always about, like, where do you phone and what number do you use? If you see it in action, it's 911. One of the things they talked about was if you see graffiti, and in this case it's kind of like new graffiti, and we probably all have our haunts that we kind of either walk on all the time, that we don't change the path too much, is that if you see new graffiti, something that you haven't seen in 24 or 48 hours, is to give them a call. And you could phone the 911, but you could also just phone the regular police station number and let them know that you're seeing something new. And if you're a person that does volunteer work and you like to go up and cover up the graffiti right away, the police have asked to call them first, or at least make sure that you're taking a picture and then reporting it. Because what they do is they look at the patterns within graffiti. Graffiti artists usually have a technique or a style that they use. And what they try to do is they try to, in their looking at all these cases, try to map what's going on. Like, is that symbol always over there? Like, is it always in Rosemont? Or is that symbol always in Fairview or whatever? So as much as cleaning it up is very valuable, and I appreciate all of those in the community that do go out and cover up graffiti, is to make sure if it is new that you're reporting it or taking a picture of it and then sending that picture along to police so that they have it on file. And I thought that was kind of valuable, because I think people kind of get confused as to, like, what do I do? And, you know, is it new or is it old? But I think we all, like I say, have places that we always walk or drive by, and we would notice a new tag. So It's great, it's helpful to the police if you can be reporting those things. The other thing I want to talk about is just next week, we won't be in session, but next week is National Volunteer Week. And I just want to shout out to all the volunteers in all of the different capacities who give of their time in the city of Nelson, whether it's sports or arts and culture, or many of the committees that we have, like the Housing Committee or the OCP. Nothing happens without volunteers. And I think volunteering is priceless. That's why, volunteers to a certain extent don't get paid, because the work they do is something that doesn't have a cost that can be measured against it. This year's theme is Every Moment Matters. So when you see volunteers out, and I know all of you around the table are volunteers, please acknowledge other volunteers and thank you for the service that you are doing. And the other thing is, I don't have the date here because I want to remember, because we're not meeting again. Somebody tell me the Ready Grant open house is before the
15th.
next. 15th. So the 15th. So that is like next week.
Next Monday.
Next Monday.
Yeah.
So just a reminder that we're having the open house for the Ready Grant, and from 4 to 6, it'll be here in council chambers. And if interested community members want to come and see what the list is, or bend the ear of a councillor or the mayor as to what they think is something that should be given full funding, that's your opportunity to be part of that public participation of the Ready Grant CBT program. So we have 100 and somebody's going to tell me that number too. $146,000.
46.
See, somebody's got it right there. Total, and for those that don't know, the cultural sector, they jury the applications for that part, and council basically debates and ranks the other applications
So,
after we have public feedback. What's the total amount?
well, there's total and then there's minus the allocation.
Well, what's the whole total amount is 100 and...
145,342.
Oh, I was pretty close. There we go. 146. I was just off by a few. So that process is coming up on Monday. So other than that, I've got nothing further to report. And if I can have a motion to recess, everybody will have a moment to be able to stand up. And, okay, that's moved by Councillor Payne, seconded by Councillor Woodward. And just so people know, I do have to recuse for the public meeting due to the perceived conflict of interest, as I own a short-term rental business license. So you will not see me participating in the public meeting coming up.
Do we need an acting mayor then?
Yes, there is an acting mayor. It's already the acting mayor for the month of April is Councillor Payne, so she will chair.
We can hear you back here.
You can hear me back there?
Yeah, very well.
And I'm still calling for speakers 3 times, even though I see none. Okay?
Well, yeah, yes.
Yep, I will. Just checking.
Still retiring, I guess.
Getting pretty quick on the crunches.
Yes.
Impressive. Makes you eeling around with those things spinning
Yeah.
up and down the stairs.
How much longer she on? She must have a physio, right?
She's got pretty good mobility. Yeah, gardening, you know.
123.2 million acres logged out of 149 million acres of forestry. That's logged over time. So basically 1/6 of BC has been logged.
Seems a lot less than I expected.
It is actually surprising.
I mean, it's a horrible, huge amount.
It can be
And
seen
yeah,
from space.
Yeah.
Okay, are we ready? Do we have everyone? Jesse, do you mind to take your spot? We're ready to go.
Okay.
So I declare this public hearing open. This public hearing is being convened pursuant to Section 464 of the Local Government Act to consider amendments to zoning bylaw number 3199, 2013. And I may just state at this moment that for those of you who were tuning in before and are continuing along with us, the mayor has recused herself due to a perceived conflict of interest. And so I will be chairing this portion of the meeting. So zoning amendment bylaw number 3599 proposes 3 changes. First, to amend the definition of tourist accommodation from 30 days or less to 31 days or less. Second, in section 1.1.10C, it removes the existing subsection that allows for an exemption from the principal residency requirement. Finally, it proposes the ability for an older single-family house in the C1 zone, constructed pre-August 1987, that in previous years had a commercial use, to revert back to residential use. These changes are proposed in order to align with the new provincial legislation on short-term rentals. At this hearing, any person who believes that his or her interest is affected by the proposed bylaw shall be given the opportunity to be heard on matters contained in the bylaws. No one should feel discouraged to speak, nor will any person be prevented from making their views known. However, it's important that all who speak at this hearing restrict their remarks to matters contained in the bylaws. It's my responsibility as chair of this meeting to ensure that all remarks are so restricted. Those who wish to speak concerning the proposed bylaws should address council by clearly stating their name and physical address, and thereafter proceed to provide their views concerning the proposed bylaws. Members of council may, if they so wish, ask questions following your presentation. Please note that the main function of council members this evening is to listen to views of the public. Please remember that it is not the function of council at this hearing to debate the merits of the proposed bylaws with individual citizens or with each other. Please avoid clapping or displaying any emotional responses, as such actions will not be permitted. Maintaining a composed demeanor ensures that all opinions shared can be heard in a setting that is as unbiased as possible. Thank you for your patience and cooperation. Now, let's proceed with the hearing. That was a lot. We do have staff in the room. Does staff want to come forward to explain the application?
They did at the last meeting.
Yep, has been explained. Has further correspondence been received after the agenda deadline? Staff is signifying not. So at this point in time, I will call for speakers from the public. Does anyone here wish to speak? And that's something we need to do 3 times. So I'm going to say it again. Is there anyone who would like to speak around this bylaw? And for the 3rd and final time, are there any further speakers? Seeing none and hearing none, I now declare this public meeting closed.
Thank you, Acting Mayor.
That was a lot of
No signs.
Hi, everybody. Thank you. It's 7 o'clock, and if I could have a motion to reconvene the meeting, moved by Councillor Woodward, seconded by Councillor Tate. All those in favor? And just for everybody's clarification, we are now at item number 10, requests on the agenda for this evening. And the city has received an application for a temporary use permit from Frontier Athletics aiming to establish a gym at 920 Simpson Road, categorized under participant recreation services indoor as per the city zoning bylaw. This activity is currently not allowed in the MU2 zone for this property, necessitating a TUP, temporary use permit. Council is now requested to pass a resolution to grant a temporary use permit on the above mentioned lands for the applicant to operate a gym. Councillor Pinero.
I do have a perceived conflict of interest with this item, so I would like to
Have the record show that you're
and
recused?
Have the record show that I'm recused.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Pinero. And we'll make sure to invite you back once this is done. No rush.
There's more cake.
And so we have background on analysis there, but we also, it looks like, have Sebastian Arcane from the planning department here to give us an overview. So over to you, Sebastian.
Is the mic on?
Yep.
It is.
Is it blue? Is it blue?
It's blue, yeah. Yeah, well, I think the your intro kind of summed it up. I think a lot of us know this building is the former Ramp Auto Body, and the MU2 zone. So that property has changed hands and no longer operates as an auto body repair shop. So it's a big space, and I think we need to be a bit creative to help transition this use and bring it in line with the kind of the grander idea of what the waterfront area is going to evolve to. So in this case, it's it's a gym. It's not permitted in this area of the MU2 zone. So fortunately, we have a tool through the Local Government Act, which is called Temporary Use Permit, where it allows municipality to test out a use without having to go through, more cumbersome rezoning process, so to speak. So that will allow them 3 years to try out their gym, and at the same time, it allows the municipality to see if it's a good fit for the area. Following that 3 years, there's a couple of things that can happen. If we could change the bylaw to allow this to continue, if they wish to continue, or if we feel like we're still wanting to continue via the temporary use permit avenue, council can actually extend that for another 3 years. And then that's it. After that, you have to go through an amendment or make required changes. So that's kind of essentially what's happening here. They have held a public information session. So, I have the appropriate signage. And, there's a number of people that assisted. And there's no real concerns. There's a notice published in the Nelson Star as per the LGA requirement, and this was also on our website, in addition to notices sent to properties within 60 meters. So we haven't received any comment, no concerns there. And I guess from our perspective, staff recommends that this kind of is in line with the overall waterfront development master plan. And we recommend that council approves this TUP for a period of 3 years.
Councillor Lockenberg.
I will move the recommendation.
Is there a seconder? Councillor Woodward. Councillor Lautenberg, if you don't mind.
Council approved the temporary use permit, file number 2406001, to allow the applicant to operate participant recreation services indoor in the existing buildings located on Lot 2 District, Lot 6004, Kootenai District Plan, 4104 920 Simpson Road.
Thank you. That's been moved and seconded. I do have a question to staff, and that is because it's a temporary use permit, and staff has recommended the full 3 years, do we need to indicate that there? Because I know that sometimes temporary use permits are only given for a year. Should there be reference to the fact that we are giving them right off the start the 3 years, which was what I heard staff recommend?
I think as a baseline, they are permitted for 3 years unless otherwise stated. So I think we're comfortable with recommendation as is.
Okay, just as long as that, because I just know in other jurisdictions, say like Trail, where I've seen them do temporary use permit for 1 year, and then you come back and you don't get to still have then 5 more years. You would only get to have potentially another 3 years. I mean, it's important that people understand that if you shorten the TUP, you don't necessarily end up with 6 years overall. You could end up with something that's considerably less. That's why I just wanted to know if we needed to put it in there. But just as long as it's understanding that it is for the 3 years, so we wouldn't see this necessarily come back until 2027.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. That's all my only question. Councillor Payne.
I just have a question about, does this relate to the OCP at all? Could the zoning change as a result of the OCP? I guess is the short form of that question.
Yeah, I guess, that's all part of it. Our plan is to start with the OCP and look at the policies and implement that. And logically, the next step, the following years, would probably look at your zoning bylaw to make it align with the policy. So you're right. This could be something where we would say, hey, we feel like these uses make sense. I know when the waterfront master plan was created, there was a lot of talk around not diluting from the downtown, right? Not taking some of the key components of the downtown and moving them around because we have that successful downtown. But there seems to be, room for commercial uses outside of the downtown is kind of what we're seeing. So definitely something that policy could look into and then move into zoning. So there could be an avenue where we would do these changes within the life of this TUP.
Yep, just interested from a procedural point of view. Thank you.
Any further questions for staff? Seeing none, the resolution has been moved and seconded. All those in favor? And that carries. Thank you very much. And you're on that, Chris. Thank you. And our next item is, we have no delegations this evening. Next item is 12A, bylaws. And again, this is coming into regulation with the new rules brought by the provincial government. So Bill 44 was adopted by the provincial legislature in November of 2023, requiring municipalities to update their zoning to allow for increased minimum densities and for the purpose of creating new small-scale multi-unit housing. Council is now requested to pass third reading and adoption of zoning amendment bylaw number 3593 and also adopt the off-street parking and landscape amendment bylaw number 3594. Now we've had some initial discussions on this. You've got quite a bit of information again in your packages there before you, Council, and we still have Mr. Arcane in the chair to give us a staff overview again to make sure that we understand these legislative changes.
Yeah, I guess I don't have that. At the last meeting, we had that formal presentation to kind of walk council through the proposed changes and, why the province is doing this and how it trickles down to municipalities and some of the timelines that we're required to follow. So the purpose of tonight's meeting, so at the previous council meeting, council proceeded with the first and second readings of these bylaws, and tonight would be to do third and adoption. Really quickly, this is about the provincial changes to the density requirements that are mandatory by the 30th of June 2024. So we're just a bit ahead of it. And another change that we're bringing forward is to align to those changes is some minor amendments to the parking bylaw. So essentially after tonight, should council adopt these bylaws, in any density restricted zones as per the province definition, so in our, let's call it R1 for simplicity, we could see buildings up to 3 units on smaller lots and up to 4 units on more of the typical lots in Nelson. So it's anywhere between 1 additional or 2 additional dwelling units to the rules that we have in place today. So, you know, we might see some incremental or some slow changes to some of the new residential products that we'll see constructed in Nelson. I just want to specify one thing because I know there's a bit of confusion. These are maximum densities, they're not minimum densities, meaning, you know, to a maximum of 4 units in some case or 3 units in other cases. But it's not dictating that those are the minimum density to achieve. So anyways, just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you for that. Any,
Just one
Yep.
clarification, maybe this was addressed last time. We haven't changed any of our setback requirements or any of those things at this stage, right?
No, yeah, you're correct. And you know, those are things that we want to look at when we do that comprehensive zoning bylaw review.
Okay.
councillors, do you have any questions? Councillor Payne?
We did have some communication from the public, the concern about the race to fill up our city with infill housing to meet these opportunities. I just wanted to follow up and say, have you had a huge influx of building permit requests where you feel that our population is going to increase significantly within the next 12 to 18 months?
No, we haven't. We've had some conversations with some local builders that have been doing infill housing, and they're quite interested in exploring various models, which are quite unique in some cases because we have the expertise of secondary suites and laneway houses in Nelson. We're hearing talks about some of those combinations of housing products. So. I don't think we don't have a queue of things waiting for these bylaws to be implemented. I think there's just general interest to see what new opportunities we could have, and I think it doesn't necessarily equate to affordable housing, but equates to more housing choices, which in some ways offers more housing throughout the gamut of products. So I think that's a big thing that the province is doing, and then that's definitely a conversation we've had with council at this table as well to offer, housing that would potentially fill the need for different family types, and we know that families are statistically shrinking. So this kind of all aligns with some of those things. Yeah. So it's really about housing choice, but yeah, we're not seeing a giant queue just waiting for for the gavel to drop, so to speak.
So, Sebastian, I had a conversation with a citizen actually this afternoon, and I think just the context of, this is a response to looking at housing needs, but it's not like this is your future demand for housing drives your ultimate, what you need for zoning, and this is part of it. And as Sebastian said, we don't anticipate this is going to be everyone's going to all of a sudden develop 4 units on their lot. So it's not, the housing demand is driven by demand, not the supply of housing. So maybe just explain how, the process, we have to go out and do a housing strategy, identify the needs, and then our zoning follows this. Now this is a piece that they've already put in place that will meet some of the demand, but it's a more comprehensive look at what the housing needs in our community are.
Yeah, I know, and that's another piece too. This is one piece with the overall framework from the province to try and help out with this housing crisis. Yeah, we have to do a housing needs report that highlights what's the demand over the next 20 years. And then we need to make sure that our OCP has the policies and the land uses in place to actually accommodate that demand. For example, let's say we need to build 100 homes every year for the next 20 years to meet demand. And let's say our zoning only had room for 100 homes for the next 5 years. Then we would be obliged to figure that out. So maybe upzone even more than 4 units, things like that. But we have plenty of zoned land to accommodate our growth. That's not the issue. That was not the issue before these zoning changes come into place. I know people that assume that Nelson has no room to expand, but we have a lot of infill opportunities, and in our downtown, rail town, and we've seen examples of projects going from nothing to 50 units, right? That's quite a few units being added. So yeah, this is like one piece of the puzzle, so to speak. So after this, we're already ahead of the provincial requirements. So we're doing our housing needs. We're almost done. We're just waiting for a bit more details from the province to kind of put the word final on that report, and then we're already well underway with the OCP. So we're ahead of this. I think there's a lot of municipalities kind of panicking to get everything done, but I think we're in a good position. And I think ultimately, really, it's because of the framework over the last 15 or so years where we've allowed laneway houses and secondary suites. So it's not a massive change for us.
So I think the central message is that it's the housing needs strategy that will identify what our housing demand is, and this is one piece of the puzzle to meet that. It's not like you create the zoning, all of a sudden we're going to grow. It's really, we're projecting what that growth is, and we've seen 2% sort of ish to 3% a year for a long time here. So.
Yeah, actually it's 1% a year, and it's been pretty constant for the last 20 years. So that we're, in comparison to a lot of other BC municipalities, our growth rate is just kind of a stable 1%, where, we've seen some municipality grow at 5-6% a year. So Squamish, Campbell River, some of those places. But yeah, we're just kind of a steady growth.
Any further questions for staff on the report? If not, can I have someone move the first recommendation? Moved by Councillor Tate, seconded by Councillor Woodward. Councillor Tate.
That council passes the following resolutions: that the zoning amendment bylaw number 3593/2024 be read a third time by title only.
It's been moved and seconded. No further questions. All those in favor? Opposed, and that carries. Thank you. Recommendation number 2. Moved by Councillor Tate, seconded by Councillor Woodward. Councillor Tate.
That the zoning amendment bylaw number 3593/2024 be finally adopted.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed, and that carries. And then finally, resolution number 3. Moved by Councillor Woodward, seconded by Councillor Tate. Councillor Woodward.
That the off-street parking and landscape amendment bylaw number 3594/2024 be finally adopted.
That's been moved and seconded. Councillor Payne, did you have a question?
I do.
Okay, Councillor Payne, question.
So the one question I have, and I just want to bring it forward again, is so both our downtown parking strategy and Nelson Next recommend the elimination of parking requirements. So we're not doing this at this time, but is that something that will be brought forward? So we're going with the SHMU recommendation of 1 per residence. So if you have 4 residents on the lot, then that's 4 parking spots.
Yeah, that's correct. I think that's kind of a step towards, the ultimate goal potentially of not requiring parking. I think, I think this is a good step in the right direction for now. Yeah.
I thought it was interesting today. I just took a look, and Toronto has removed parking minimums. I don't know. It's obviously, I'm not comparing apples to apples in any way, but when I looked across the country at communities that had done it, I was a little surprised that they're leading the way on that one.
Yeah, I've worked in a community where we've done it, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't really work. I think sometimes what happens is, after the fact, the pressure comes to the municipality to say, well, we've allowed this, but I can't rent it or can't sell it because I don't have the parking my tenants wants. Can you help me? And then it's like, it wasn't the point, right? You run your business case the way you want it. We're not going to interfere in it. But so And sometimes it works well, sometimes so you got to approach that with a bit of caution. I think it's sometimes it's a statement more than anything else to remove parking. But I think it needs to be matched with the reality of the community and where people are comfortable without vehicle ownership. So,
Thanks.
Okay, any further questions? That's item number 3, resolution number 3 has been moved and seconded. All those in favor and those opposed, and that carries. Thank you very much. Moving on to item 12B, bylaws regarding the short-term rental bylaw. At this time, I have to ask for the record to show that I've recused, as I am in perceived conflict of interest, as I am the owner of a short-term rental license. So, Councillor Payne will take the chair. It's all right there if you want to read it off.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, just okay.
Just take a momentary pause if you want to get up, stretch your legs, move around, or not. I can do the public service announcement. I have another one. I was talking earlier during the council reports that I witnessed the controlled burn that our fire department worked with BC Wildfire Services on. And while I was there, I spoke with Scott Jeffrey, who fire smarted my house. And we were talking about the fact that now is the time to call and book your Fire Smart appointment. It's a service not only to your own building, and I think as we go forward in this environment, insurance companies are taking a much closer look at whether you've had that kind of work done. It's also a service to your neighbors and your community. And for something that has no cost to you and multiple benefits, I can't really think of a reason that you wouldn't want to do it. It doesn't matter how tidy or untidy your property is. They will still come over and tell you how they can make things better for you. And one of the big ones for me was just recommending the different plants that I could use around my property that would make not an aesthetic difference, but they would make a difference as far as fire transfer. I thought living slightly inside, Kate's back, I can stop now. The town, I was safe, but it's the embers that will get further into the city, and having a dried out cedar bush on your property in August if we see ember showers is not a good thing to think about. That was the public service announcement. Thank you for that opportunity. So now we are back together with quorum to, I'll just read the summary here. Bill 35, adopted by the Provincial Legislature in October 2023, introduces new provincial-wide regulation for short-term rentals. A key component of these regulations is the new provincial principal residence requirement coming into effect May 1st, 2024. To align with the provincial legislation, the City of Nelson's business license bylaw and zoning bylaw need to be amended. Accordingly, staff has prepared Business License Amendment Bylaw number 3598, 2024, and Zoning Amendment Bylaw number 3599, 2024. Council is now requested to adopt the Business License Amendment Bylaw, as well as pass third reading and adopt the Zoning Amendment Bylaw. Staff is here. Is there something you're going to tell us?
Nothing to add to your introduction. I'm just here to answer questions, and I also actually wanted to add that there's been ongoing communication with members of the public about these amendments and also the provincial regulations. The provincial regulations are going to be implemented in a phased approach, so we are waiting for more information, and we'll keep informing the public and provide guidance as we get the information from the province.
questions from council? So, Councillor Pinheiro?
Has there been anybody yet in that sort of commercial zone situation that has approached you guys about switching back to residential housing at this point?
We've had a few discussions with some operators, yes, that who are considering switching back to long-term rental. I think a few others are waiting for a clarification from the province on the hotel motel definition. So, but yeah, I would say I've talked to 2 or 3 operators who are considering long-term rental operation.
Councillor Lochtenberg?
Yeah, thanks. So it seems to me that this is, this is a provincial initiative, it's provincial policy, and it's obviously it impacts us and affects us as a municipality and as a local government in that we need to align with policy. We have no real effective choice or power here except to potentially advocate to our provincial counterparts for more support, more clarity. I think to roll this back seems highly unlikely given how much the government has invested in this approach. At least in the conversations I've had, it seems like this is locked in. But I think, we need to continue to be responsive to our community and try to find ways to make this work. I do hope that maybe a part of that is being more creative with turning these operations into residential long-term rental. I can't see how else we can move ahead given the environment. But to the broader community, I would just say that if this is something that you're very passionate about, it's the MLA is the person to talk to, and we can, pass on your concerns to higher levels of government. But at this point, we're just implementing provincial policy, really. So thank you for your work, and I'll continue to respond to anyone who reaches out and try to help make this transition smoother.
Anything else? Yeah, it's interesting to me because we are going to our Association of Kootenay Boundary Local Government Conference in a week and a half. So we'll have that opportunity to talk with other municipalities in Kootenay Boundary, but my understanding would be that the only other municipality affected by this would be Cranbrook. So really, there's just the 2 municipalities in our area that are over 10,000 that qualify for
It's over
this.
5,000.
It's 10.
It's 10? I thought it was 5. That's the other bylaw. That's the other bylaw.
It's the other one is 5.
Right, sorry.
But, no problem. Always good to have the conversation and the clarification. It's important for us to know. But yeah, Cranbrook is the only other one. So it'll be interesting to see if they're running into some of the same issues. And I don't know if Development Services has had those conversations with other communities across the province, but I don't think we're isolated in the fact. The one thing that's different to me is that Nelson was really proactive around putting a short-term rental policy into place that I felt seemed to be working for us. And other communities, unfortunately, were not, which is what has gotten us, I think, to where we are today with the. So with that, could I get someone to read the first recommendation? Oh, sorry, did you have another question?
No, I was going to move the recommendation if it hadn't been moved already. Which
Someone has to.
yeah, I'll move
Move
it.
in second, and then
Councilor Pinero's second.
Okay, I'll move it.
yeah. Thank you.
That the business license amendment bylaw number 3598/2024 be finally adopted.
In a second?
That was Pinero.
Pinheiro, second.
Any further questions or discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Carries?
I'll move the second recommendation.
Thank you. In a second? Councillor Lochtenberg.
That the zoning amendment bylaw number 3599 2024 be read a third time by title only.
Further questions, comments, and all in favor? Third one? Councillor Lochtenberg.
I'll second.
And a second.
That the zoning amendment bylaw number 3599 2024 be finally adopted.
Questions, comments, and all in favor? And that passes. Okay, and just for anyone tuning in for the first time to this meeting, we did meet on this a month ago for the first two readings, had fulsome conversation. There was lots going on, and we have, as Development Services has mentioned, reached out and conferred with the public around this. Councillor Lochtenberg let us know that we are a creature of the province, and this is one time when they have definitely demonstrated that ability. So we can recall the mayor, and I'll go back to my chair. That's okay.
Thank you. Thank you for all of that work. That's so much work.
They seem upset.
Did we lose the mayor? We lost the mayor.
Should have a tracker on her.
Okay.
Cat tracker, like a pet tracker.
I remember her eyes. It's so dry. It'll look like I'm crying, but it's not that bad. An emotional moment.
Yeah, right.
This whole thing
Yeah,
was,
it's sort of it seems like the opposite of the
child,
Correspondence situation. Maybe it's the same. Like we
pandemic.
were responsible and being proactive and
basically.
I think managing.
Well, I think it
well.
really ramped up.
And the government just came
During
in.
pandemic.
And I get that side of it as well.
Yeah.
But
It's never going.
yeah,
Yeah.
It's one of those, like, I think everybody would agree, yeah, Nelson probably should get an exception, but how?
It really changed the
It's not now.
vibe.
yeah,
Unless I guess you can talk about our municipality,
Yeah.
that would be the way.
that would be the way. Okay. Sorry, did I mess up the pile?
It's okay. Not a problem. I'll figure out the pile. Okay, and now we are on item 12C, Sidewalk Cafe Amendment Bylaw. And I'm not going to read the analysis summary because we have, once again, staff. We have Sebastian here to talk to us about the changes to the Sidewalk Cafe Bylaw number 3441 and some fees and charges bylaw changes. So I will turn it over to him to talk about our patios.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I thought it'd be a good time to, this is kind of a time of year when we start to talk about the sidewalk cafes or patios. I'll use those words interchangeably if that's okay. So just to, at the same time as presenting the bylaw amendments, I think it's good to just kind of go through, you know, like the last few years, what's happened and you know, kind of bring us to where we're at today. So in 2019 is when we introduced the Sidewalk Cafe bylaw. And you will say, well, sidewalk cafes or patios existed before then. It was, yes, it was just, we administered it via policy and it was a bit more cumbersome from a staffing perspective too. keep track of it all. So in 2019, it became a bylaw. 2020, COVID hit, and we were kind of, as a municipality, trying to think like, what can we do to help out? And that was something that we weren't the only municipality, but we looked at relaxing the fees and also expanding the exterior space because of all these restrictions for restaurant operators to operate successfully, and also to ensure that we maintain our thriving downtown. And essentially, it was a bylaw amendment, which is, we use the word, under extraordinary circumstances, the director may approve a sidewalk cafe to temporarily extend onto a neighboring business frontage if written agreement is granted yearly from the adjacent business owner. So that was what we used in 2020, and that was a way to ensure good neighbors kind of policy. 2021, things kind of kept dragging on. We kept it the same. In 2022 was a bit of a transition year. There was still a fee relaxation, but if any operators wanted to go above and beyond the regular kind of dedicated space for the patio, they would have to pay for that section. In 2023, we maintained that, or in 2023, sorry, I didn't put it here, but we removed the fee relaxation. And on the question around expanding patios, we felt that extraordinary circumstances was a bit of a stretch. So at that time, we decided to, I guess the council resolution was to keep it the same in 2023, but in 2024, I'd come back to council and propose some more permanent changes, given that, we're kind of no longer in the pandemic. So here we are, 2024. So what does the regulation do? It really, it looks at essentially 4 key components. So the design, the location, the hours of operation, and the period of operation for these sidewalk cafes. Other policies that we have in place that kind of kick into, our public space, and also that were looked at in crafting this bylaw was, we have an OCP policy that talks about 50% of amenity areas should be retained for public use. We have other policies around minimum unobstructed path of travels. We have a sidewalk and amenity areas policy, and that regulates the use of amenity area for sidewalk sales. So once in a while, you'll see some racks or things like that in amenity area for sales. So that's through policy. And then there's another policy, the sidewalk vending and sales, which guides the vending and sales on sidewalks in the downtown versus the amenity area. So those are separate, but they kind of talk to each other in some way. The Downtown Urban Design Strategy, that was a document that really talked about the patios and their importance and design consideration. We have our downtown parking strategy as well. So it really talks about, balancing the different groups, needs and wants. And the premise of the policy is kind of customers and downtown residents first, while balancing amenities like patios. So that is something that we look at in terms of doing all of this. No, it's okay. Can you put it back to presentation mode? You're killing my flow. Thank you. And the community charter, of course. We have to be careful. We can't provide assistance to business, right? So we have to, this is public space that we're renting out, so we got to make sure we get the appropriate fees for that so that we're not assisting one business over another. So I walk around downtown and I look at sidewalks and I really dig into it. So I just wanted to do a couple measurements just for council's perspective here. Most of our sidewalk downtowns are roughly 3.8 meters wide. And then, but there's all sorts of areas within the sidewalks and amenities. There's trees, there's parking meters, there's bench, there's lights. And in some cases, it goes down to 2 meters. In some cases, it's 2.6. I just showed a couple of examples because I think these are some of the pinch points in my opinion. And, it goes down to 2.2 meters in some cases, or 2 meters where the trees are. I think it's just to kind of, you know, talk about what type of space we're working with. And again, if you're like me and you think about the sidewalks and how they're utilized and what different areas of sidewalks are used for, the green kind of area that I've highlighted there is kind of, they call it the building entry zone. That's where you'll look at the realtor sale signs, you'll look at, you know, what's in the windows, things like that, or you're kind of waiting to get into business. So usually, you know, they recommend, and the images on the right side are from our urban design guidelines, or design strategy, my apologies. Usually they say that 0.8 meters is kind of a good amount of space to consider that area. What I've highlighted in yellow is kind of your pedestrian clearway zones. That's kind of like, I want to go get a coffee, or I don't want to be late to my yoga class or whatever. I want to move. So that's the area you have to retain. And the minimum is 1.5 meters, and even that is pretty tight, but that 0.8 meter that is between that and the building frontage is kind of that extra wiggle room that you can move around people. And then you basically have your kind of you know, it can be called a few different things, but your street furnishing zone, or they call it the street edge zone. That's where you kind of put your park benches, your trees, your lights, your parking meters, and that's kind of that blue dash area. So, you know, you'll see that blue dash area kind of next time you walk downtown, just have a look. It's pretty consistent, right? Everything's kind of jammed in there. There's a couple of amenity space that kind of encroach a bit in the pedestrian zone, but that's kind of the area that, you know, that's how we want to think about our sidewalk. That's how we want to utilize them. So quick math would say, you know, your 1.5 meters plus your 0.8 meter building entry zone gives you 2.3 meters, right? Currently in our bylaw, we say 2 meters for sidewalk cafes along Baker and 1.6 on any other street. And one of the recommendations of these changes is to go to the actual 2.3. It would just give us that bit of extra area to make sure that, you know, our downtown circulation works well. And that, of course, would be for new patios, right? Like, you know, some of them are all designed. It'd be a lot of work for them to start to chop them up, and but anything new will have to abide by that. And you know, these are things you want to think about. You know, in a number of years when we want to think about redesigning Baker potentially, like those are things like, okay, where do the sidewalk cafes like actually fit into the space instead of kind of like adding them to the space, right? So we know that they're very popular, they're not going to go away, and you know, it helps to make our downtown really kind of busy and thriving. So again, I just want to kind of, you know, present some of these notions about, you know, how to dissect a sidewalk, I guess.
Before you go on, I have a question from Councillor Payne.
I'm just interested, so when I looked at this today, I didn't have the tools to try it. Well, when I looked at it earlier, I didn't have the tools to try it out. But can a stroller and a wheelchair pass each other in the 2.3? I'm wondering how designers come to these dimensions. And just a simple, quick answer, but I'm thinking of our age-friendly community.
Yeah.
And as more individuals are going into that, you know, silver tsunami, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
There will be more mobility devices, I presume, being used, and I don't know if those design guidelines are created with that in mind.
Yeah, for sure. And there's a lot of different standards. These are our standards from our downtown urban design strategy. But, you know, I think another really good guide is the BC Active Transportation Guidelines, which talks about all of this. But,
thanks.
You know, they use desirable width and then constrained width and minimum width. So as long as you're somewhere in between there, it's a choice that you're making, right? I think to your example, I think it would work. I think, would it be tight? Yeah, probably. But yeah, and then if you look at, you know, preferred widths, we'd probably say like, oh, we want 4 meters free and clear, right? So I think when we rethink Baker, I think given, you know, we have a busy downtown at all times of the day, so we might want to think about how much space we want, right? So, yeah.
Thank you.
Types of sidewalk cafes. We've got kind of this frontage patio, not super popular here in Nelson, but the Kootenai Bakery uses this. There's no fee to it. You roll out chairs in the morning and you bring them back inside, and you use that 0.8 meter kind of area. I think the major barrier in North America is liquor licensing, where it needs to be gated and all of that, so it makes it a lot more tricky. So when you think about why does this work in Europe, they probably don't have all the same regs as us. But for a coffee shop, it seems to work really well, and low barrier, free, and it usually is pretty well utilized. There's the curbside amenity patio. That's kind of that 1.5 meter area. As you saw in my photos, we've got a lot of stuff in that area. We've got trees, we've got parking meters, we've got benches, we've got lights. So there's not a lot of room to... Sandwich boards. So there's not a lot of room to put tables in there, I think, and it's not all even. Some of it's slanted and the trees are, popping out. So it's not a super easy area to utilize. You almost have to create a platform to make it flat, and that's why we see most of our patios are built on some sort of a wood or steel platform. The parking patios is often what we see with a kind of combination of that curbside area. So that's often what we'll see in Nelson, right? They'll build that platform, even out everything, and they'll use that area. So that's roughly that's probably the most popular that we have. So those are kind of the four choices. And in terms of use of parking, there are angled spots and there's parallel parking. And just the reality of parallel parking spaces, we have to utilize 3 parking spaces to make kind of the same space as one parallel. So no location is the same. Some benefit from a lower rental fee because they only have to utilize 1 parallel space, where others have to utilize 3 angled. Question?
Jesse, sorry.
Thank you.
Councilwoman.
Through the chair. I'm curious with the parking patio design in terms of liability for the businesses, for their customers on the street. Is there a liability issue that
so part of the application is on a yearly basis, they have to give us a copy of their insurance. They need to be provide insurance of a value of $5 million, and the city is named as an additional insured party.
Okay.
So that's something that we verify on a yearly basis.
Okay. So we're protected.
Yeah.
And they're protected because they have this $5 million in case something goes very sideways. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
So just to show that, there's different configuration for parking, but, in some cases, if you're fronting an angled parking, some utilize 2, some utilize 3, but you can't really jam it on 1 because you'd have this weird shape of patio that wouldn't work anyway. So, just for a bit of background, in case you see one kind of using 3 spaces. By the numbers, I think, slow growth on number of restaurants that have patios. I think 23 is kind of where we're at. I anticipate that to stay the same for 2024. But relatively slow growth. Some restaurants have closed and have been taken over by others, so that kind of doesn't add to it. Roughly 3/4 use, or 2/3 use on-street parking. Number of parking stalls, 27 parking stalls, and number of businesses that use the clause where you can have an additional parking stall as long as your neighbor is okay with it. There's only 2, and that's included in the 27. So 27 parking stalls, just to give you an order of magnitude of what that represent for, if we look at only metered stalls in our downtown, It's roughly 4% of the downtown parking stalls. So, pretty small number when you think about it. What's the community's perspective? We did this survey back in 2020. It was pretty positive. I think, things like, should we allow them? Yes. Should there be a cap? Unsure. A few people said, 25% said yes, there should be a cap, but the majority was that we shouldn't. And generally speaking, it was, people were pretty happy with that in 2020. We haven't surveyed again. We feel like this is still fairly recent. Hasn't been too many changes, but it doesn't mean that in a number of years. I think I would probably repose that question as we get into redesigning Baker. What do we want the street to be? And that's probably a good time to think about those questions. From the business perspective, Chamber of Commerce have provided some feedback. So they would like the bylaw amended for expanded patios to basically reflect what we have been allowing for the last four years. And they also asked to revisit the start date. And just on the start date piece, I think when we can, we let them start earlier, but we need to give ourselves until May 1st. Some years are great. Even last year, there was some, not any snow, but it was cold, so we couldn't do some of the flushing and things like that. So it's important that we give ourselves time, because then on the trailing end, when they start removing them in October, like sometimes we don't have a whole lot of time to do concrete fixes and stuff like that. So we feel that we should keep it, and that in mind, we're cognizant that the weathers can be really nice in April, and we try and get our stuff done to get them going as soon as possible. But we need to give ourselves that time. Some of the concerns we've heard, we've got a number of communications around. They feel it should return to pre-pandemic size. I think it's important to, 1 year there's a lot of patios that expanded because there was no fees. And when we reintroduced the fees, they went back to their kind of like the normal size. But there's only 2 expanded patios, and as far as I know, for this year, no one else is asking for it.
Sorry. Do you
Yes.
mean expanded like wider than their own frontage?
Yeah.
Ask the neighbors, borrowed a parking stall.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Essentially, take an additional parking stall in front of their neighbors.
There's 2 patios that have done that.
Last year, since the fees have kicked in again last year, and are asking for this year as well.
Just one more. Is it parking stalls on each side or just one?
Just one. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And in one case, one of the businesses has a lot of frontage, so they don't need to ask their neighbor. They have a big frontage. So other cases, the business is pretty narrow, so they have to ask. Yeah. Again, no site is the same. General concerns over losing parking stalls, unfair use of public space, restricts pedestrian movements, and also we've heard that a business feels that not being located on Baker, they see less clientele because, in theory, the larger patios would take away from that. So those are kind of like the counterpoints that we've heard on this item, and I think these have been pretty standard over the years. Okay, so summary. Each location is unique, parking configuration, so it might be angled, it might be parallel. The road grade and the relationship with the street is completely different. Sometimes you see some that they look really massive, it's just they're on a real big angle, so they have to prop it up, so it just visually looks bigger, they're not bigger. The sidewalk width varies in some cases. Some cases, part of the amenity area is used. And those are the businesses that don't need to rent parking spaces because they can benefit from the amenity area. So, what's that saying? Location, location, location applies here. But the Sidewalk Cafe bylaw is meant to create a consistent and fair set of rules for all businesses. So that's what we try and create here.
Councillor Payne has a question for you.
Sure.
So the businesses that use part of the amenities, I don't think I saw that in the fee structure, or did I? Part of the amenity space, how is that covered?
Yeah, no, everyone, it's kind of a two-layered system. You pay for the parking space as, you know, as a number. So it is currently 300 per parking stall. In addition to that, you pay for the square footage of your patio.
Okay, so if you don't need a parking spot and you're just using the amenity space,
Yeah.
like, is that the 200 block of Baker or the 300 block?
Four or five?
400?
400, yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
and some businesses are
That's
using.
just on, per square, a
Yeah,
square footage thing?
yeah,
Okay, that's what I
exactly.
wasn't clear on. Thank you.
Yeah, so for 2024, based on our review and conversations we've had, here are the things that we feel that council should address. Increase the parking stall rental fee from $300 to $480. That's to reflect our new parking meter rates, and that goes in line with assistance to businesses. So that matches, you know, the 60% increase.
Councillor Woodward.
Thank you. Does that parking stall rental fee for $480, that basically would cover what that parking spot would earn during the patio season?
Not on its own, but once you add up the square footage fee on top of that parking stall, it gets pretty close to an average meter revenue for that period.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, and I think once we implement, you know, a pay by phone system, we'll be able to get way better data on revenues and things like that. But yeah, that's we did verify that with finance to make sure that we're on par.
Okay, thank you.
Remove the extraordinary circumstances clause, but clarify if you are to expand, this is what you need to do. You need 2.3 meters. Free and clear instead of 2, even though you're an existing, and you need your neighbor's permission. Increase the minimum separation between patios and building facade to, like I mentioned, to 2.3 meters on Baker and 2 meters on the other streets. Caveat there is if you've been operating lawfully and you know you're just renewing your permit on a yearly basis, we're not going to make you change that. But if you have been operating a patio and you want to change the design of it, or yours is end of life, you have to put a new one, that's when these new rules would kick in. And address the use of fossil fuel heaters. I know the bylaw was fairly silent on it. The reality is they kind of popped up without anyone knowing, and you know, I don't think there was malintent there. The businesses were just running their business as, you know, what the clients wanted, but to add a clause in there that as of 2024, no more new fossil fuel heaters.
May I?
Councillor Payne, then
Yes,
Councillor Woodward, then Councillor Lockenberg.
So I just want to clarify what I read is, so businesses that have an existing fossil fuel heaters are allowed to maintain those.
Yeah.
So is there no way for us to?
I think there could be a way because it's on our property, so we could push. To me, this was kind of a in between. You know, in talking to the businesses, they felt that they had done. You know, they didn't do it by trying to skirt the rules, and they invested a significant amount of money into it. So they felt a bit nervous about this, and I think, you know, in my conversation with the restaurant community, I said, you know, I think you should try and innovate. I think, you know, there's examples out there of, you know, heated cushions and various things that exist, and yeah, they should, you know, lead by example. So that message was, you know, kind of clear and received to them. But in the meantime, yeah, we just wanted to address something that the bylaw was silent on. But if there's a question around removing what's existing, I think we would want to do a bit of digging around, like what does that involve just before
How many businesses does that involve? Like 4, 10?
Top of my mind, I know that, like ones that are kind of plumbed into the system. Like there's one's electrical, and I think there's 2, 3.
That are gas.
I believe gas, yes. Yeah. And, they done it through the permits, through the gas, plumbing stuff, which doesn't come to us. So, so they thought they were, they didn't think they were doing anything behind, that wasn't permitted. So it's kind of an unfortunate thing, but, sometimes these things slip between the cracks, and I think we're addressing for the future now.
Councillor Woodward and then Councillor Lockenberg.
A question answered, thank you.
Councillor Lockenberg.
So in 2019 or 2020, when this came up, we actually addressed it at the very beginning when we talked about the expansion of the patios, the gas heaters, and I remember being pretty strong that this was not to be permitted. We had a robust discussion about it, and we made it clear, and I think we sent the signal that this is has to be temporary, in part because this was our property, and the work that had been done on our property without our permission. And so when we discovered that it was done, of course it was going against everything we were trying to promote, and the alternatives were there. And the City of Vancouver had done quite a bit of work on it, had established these great alternatives to essentially burning fossil fuels to heat the outside.
Yeah.
So now, almost 4 years later, I would say, I think that's enough time. So I would strongly suggest amending this to have 1 year of grace at maximum, but I'd like to see these gone by next year for sure, if not sooner. And I'm feeling pretty strong about this because we did strongly talk about it. We did, even back then, identify really good alternatives that would probably be cheaper in the end to operate over the long term. So there's no reason really for these things to stay. So I just want to be clear about that. The second thing, if I may, is unrelated, Mayor, is that okay?
Yeah.
Is the equity part of this. We talk about, first of all, I just want to say I'm in favor overall of this bylaw. I think the patios have been great. I love them, and I'd even be a little soft on the parking stall rental fee going up that much and phasing it in. I'd be okay with, but if we're okay with that amount now, I'm fine with it. However, moving on to the amenities space, I do have some concerns about how we might be encroaching on public space that could otherwise be used for gathering for free. Like, I know we've got the Nelson Becker's picnic table there next to Beauties, which I think is great. I've sat at it a few times and it's nice to have it there. I think that kind of thing is something we should be really encouraging. And so I just want to stress that when you're building these patios onto public amenity space, then I would strongly encourage us to be more encouraging, supportive, tolerant about people who are offering more free and equitable alternatives.
Yeah, no, point taken. I mean, ultimately, right now, the bylaw was crafted as per the OCP, which said 50%, right? So 50% cannot be utilized. 50% of those amenity areas cannot be utilized for private use. So, should council want to explore changing that, then I think we'd have to look at the OCP policy, right? Because that sets the guideline for us to write these bylaws, right? So that's where it comes from.
Right.
Yeah. And I think, public amenity space and talking to the restaurants, it's, in some way, shape, or form, it kind of needs to be animated, right? We need to really think about what, dropping a picnic table might not solve everything. I think it makes a statement. But yeah, I think, animating those spaces. And I'm not saying like somebody needs to be there and entertain people, but you know, like how do we make it like, you know, really obvious that it is kind of a public space, and how do we spread that out throughout the downtown so that people can, yeah, find that free place to hang out. I think yeah, it's a good point. We need to look at it in the future, and I think, you know, do a better job at it. And I believe a public works crew, for example, were renovating the benches, right? Just making them, again, more inviting to sit there. So those are all kind of the, you know, the little things that can help. Yeah, so right now, yeah, you know, a bit of a long answer, but we operate under the 50% rule under the OCP policy. So maybe something to look at in the future. And again, I think we're working with an old design, and we're trying to jam a lot of things in there. And I think, you know, at some point in time, we're going to want to start to think about what Baker of the future looks like, given how things have evolved over the years. And then those are good topics of conversation, right? Well, how do we make these places a bit more flexible and, yeah, create more, right? Because if you create more public space, then, you know, less people congregate in one space, right? So that's kind of the general idea with space, yeah.
Councillor Lock, or-
So just to return to the first item, I had two thoughts here. One was to propose an amendment to this bylaw that did say that we're not permitting any gas furnace, so the existing ones would have to be taken out and removed, or alternatively send the signal to those businesses that we're going to revisit this next year, direct staff to bring this back next year, to amend this bylaw to do it next year, giving them a year grace and time to sort of plan for it. So I'll share those two options with council that I'd like to put forward. I don't know if I'd get a second on it, but as a discussion point, I'd like to move one of those two.
Yeah, can I suggest probably where we're at in the day with this is to adopt this as is, and I would pass a formal resolution afterwards that gives note, you know, for staff to give notice to all patio owners that they've been directed by council to amend the, you know, bring an amended bylaw for 2025 and you know, get it formally on the table. So, you know, because we did have the discussion, you know, sometimes we have those discussions and there's nothing formal comes out of it. So it's not part of the, you know, the actual decision of council other than, you know, discussion and debate and well, not even debate because it never got, you know, resolved one way or the other. So I think it is fair to, you know, those folks to, you know, to have something formally on the record and that, you know, that our staff now has, you know, this is what our marching orders are, and if that's the, you know, the will of council at the day. But I think, you know, passing this and getting this on the table, it doesn't, you know, council can revisit these bylaws anytime they choose, so it doesn't prevent that from happening.
Councillor Woodward.
Just so that we can have a concrete number, this is a Washington Post piece here. It just says here, if you ran your patio heater for 5 hours a week over the course of 3 months, you generate as much carbon dioxide as driving a car 450 miles. So you have restaurants burning numerous patio heaters for 5 to 6 hours a night over an entire outdoor season. I mean, we're talking massive quantities of GHGs. So I think Councillor Lautenberg really, I mean, we did talk about this quite clearly, and it's extremely wasteful, and it does really, like, you know, we came up with Nelson Next to try to move our town in a different direction, and this is just spewing. So.
Do you have anything? Is there more to your presentation?
No, that's it.
Okay, so
Ended
there's,
it with a bang.
yeah, just as long as the propane tanks aren't blowing up. Thank you, Ed. Thank you for that visual. Counselor Payne.
I obviously do not understand the math here for how much we're charging for a parking spot. So we charge for the parking spot a certain fixed amount and then a square footage amount on top of that? Or you're saying that if there's so if I can use an example, that's going to help me. So cantina, as far as I understand, are just in parking spots. They're not, we don't charge them for that sidewalk area that they
We do.
utilized? Oh, to go back,
Yeah.
okay.
So we basically look at the patio size and we charge $48.50 per square meters. So that's your baseline fee plus parking.
So it doesn't matter where the patio is, if it's on the parking or if it's on the, so if it's on the parking, you pay the square footage plus the parking
correct.
spots. And if it's on one of the other sidewalk areas that
Yeah.
we're talking about, so say back roads or beauties are not on parking spots, so they would just be paying their square footage.
Correct.
Okay,
Correct. Because there's no loss in revenue per se, right? On those
Yeah.
spaces.
yeah, that's it.
And there's a few other examples of others that are in bump outs or things like that,
Yeah.
so they don't pay for the park.
Yeah, because when I did the math just on the parking spot and not adding the square footage to it, I thought those were two separate things. It seemed like we were undercharging for the possible revenue from the parking spots.
Right.
But I didn't add those two together.
Yeah, no, we verify with finance and we kind of, there's a bit of assumption, right? Like what does 1 meter generate? They probably don't generate the same at every location, but yeah, that we looked at that and it's pretty close. And then I think in my report I said the average patio application fee for the year is roughly $2,200. Some of them are $4,000, some of them are $800, right? Depends on how many parking stalls you have.
I missed that part, sorry about that. Yeah, that makes more sense.
Yeah.
Because just doing the straight math, I thought in the summertime, those parking spots would probably be
Yeah.
from 9 to 5, 6 days a week, they're probably chock-a-block,
Yeah,
even if you look at the 85% figure.
that's what we do. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. I didn't see the original math, so it was hard for me to look at it just from the point of taking what to me was an arbitrary number without that background information to increase it.
Yeah.
That helped, thank you.
No problem.
Counselors, any other questions? And so are we going ahead with some of these recommendations and then you're going to make a fifth resolution?
Yeah.
Okay, so there we go. So we've got the following resolutions in front of us. Would somebody like to move recommendation number 1?
Move.
That's been moved, and I can have a seconder. Seconded by Councillor Pinero. Councillor Woodward.
That the Sidewalk Cafe Amendment Bylaw number 3600/2024 be introduced and read a first and second time by title only.
That's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? And that carries. Item number 2. Can I have a mover? Moved by Councillor Woodward. Seconded by Councillor Tate.
That
Councillor Woodward.
That the Sidewalk Cafe Amendment Bylaw number 3600/2024 be read a third time by title only.
Okay, all those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Resolution number 3. Councillor Tate.
That the fees, need a
Can I have
second.
a seconder? Councillor Woodward.
I just have a quick question.
Yes.
Are these fees examined on an annual basis or, thank you, I thought so, but I wanted to clarify. Thank you.
Councillor Tate.
That the fees and charges amendment bylaw number 3601/2024 be introduced and read for a first and second time by title only.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? And that carries. Item number 4. Councillor Tate. Seconded by Councillor Woodward.
that the fees and charges amendment bylaw number 3601/2024 be read a third time by title only.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? And opposed, and that carries. Councillor Lockenberg, you have a additional resolution.
Yes, I do. That staff notify restaurants using combustible gas heaters that council will be bringing back, not sure the language, will be revisiting the bylaw for amendment, directing all combustible gas heaters to be removed. Something like that.
Let the professional.
I was gonna say, let's try Sarah's.
And then we'll vote on which one we like better.
Totally fine. I just say that council amend the Sidewalk Cafe bylaw number 3441 to address the use of fossil fuel heaters and provide notice to restaurant owners that fossil fuel heaters are no longer permitted prior to the 2025 patio season.
Great.
Yeah, is that
Way
okay?
better.
Can I ask a question about that?
Sure.
I think we need to make it clear to the restaurant owners that the patios are on city property. So this is our bylaw, right? It's not, because they might see it as their equipment, their space, they're renting it, but I think it would have to be made clear to them that it's actually city property, so there's city rules. Do you think that's necessary?
Well, it's our bylaw, so they have to follow our rules.
Okay,
So we own the bylaw,
okay.
yeah, so.
And they're leasing those spaces. They
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
they know it's on our property.
Yeah, it's Councillor Tate.
Because there are likely some establishments that have fossil fuel heaters that are not on city property.
Yes, that's right. That's what I was, so just the clarification there. Like if they have their own deck or, right? We can't say no to that, right, on their property, but we can say on
Like say
our
it's
leased property. Is that correct?
Yeah. This bylaw talks only about patios on public property.
Yeah.
Okay.
We could in the future craft such a bylaw. No standalone fossil fuel heaters in Nelson, for example, or similar.
That's not what we're doing.
But that's not what we're doing
here.
right now.
I think so. I think we've
Okay.
got something here. Could I please ask Sarah to read that again, to make sure everybody knows what you're voting on?
The council amend the Sidewalk Cafe bylaw number 3441 to address the use of fossil fuel heaters and provide notice to restaurant owners that fossil fuel heaters are no longer permitted prior to the 2025 patio season.
Sarah, just, that seems to me that we're going to amend it now versus we're going to amend it in the future. That direct staff to bring back an amendment by April,
Yeah.
by April 2025 to amend. Because otherwise, it's saying we're amending it now.
There's a year.
Yeah, it's been getting a year, so I mean, it's just about, depending on how we word it now, it sounds like we're doing it right now, but I mean, we don't need to do this amendment. We might have more amendments, right? This amendment would for sure be in the 2025 licensing, so we could do it in March.
Coming, but
And
it's
people
not-
have noticed.
Yeah.
They'll have a
So they're not
patio
gonna-
now that they know.
Yeah.
Yes.
Don't go invest a lot of money.
When do you think is a reasonable?
Get your heaters up on
A heater now
Facebook.
that they could use next year.
By March?
People will buy.
Yeah, I mean, the license the permits are issued for like
Pretty
May
good.
1st of the year, so.
By March 2025. So, because I'm saying that council direct staff to bring back to council by March 2025.
Yeah, I think that's.
An amendment to the sidewalk.
And to notify.
And to notify, it's all there. Do you want me to read the whole thing?
Yes.
Like
Okay.
a lizard.
The council direct staff to bring back to council by March 2025 an amendment to the Sidewalk Cafe bylaw number 3441 to address the use of fossil fuel heaters and provide notice to restaurant owners that fossil fuel heaters are no longer permitted prior to the 2025 patio season.
Will no longer be.
Will no longer be
Permitted.
okay. Permitted. Prior to, yeah.
Okay, so we've heard the resolution. It's been moved. And do we have a seconder? Councillor Payne. And is there any further discussion on this? Everybody knows what we're trying to accomplish here?
The restaurant owners will know now.
Oh, yeah,
Okay.
they're probably watching.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Patios are near and dear to their heart.
Yes.
Yeah, so,
Sorry.
yes?
Do we have any
Councillor Kane?
idea how many people are actually using those types of heaters? Like out of the existing licenses?
Yeah, I mean, I think 3 or 4. I'm not sure how many would have like the kind of more portable ones. I haven't seen a lot of them, but
Yeah, definitely. Rosano has portable
Right,
ones,
yes.
I think most.
yeah. But I know there's 3 or 4 that are like properly like piped to their gas system. So yeah.
Right.
I believe one hasn't had it for a while, but I believe it's like more of an infrared electrical one. So there's a bit of a mixed bag of it.
So just the significance of that shift for people, I guess, and if that's enough time for an average business to shift in that way.
Well, in 2020, if I may, Mayor, in
Yeah.
2020, the shift was pretty dramatic to get them installed.
Yeah.
So it was like in a matter of months. And at the same time that we were doing that, or these businesses were installing the gas, there was a number of restaurants that were installing or setting up electric alternatives. In fact, and really getting great reviews on them. They're readily available, and you can even if you just did the electric cushions, like those, you can have in a week, and you could be good to go.
Yeah.
I remember, we had, when you said it, we had quite a long discussion at council around this, because we were because of COVID and all the necessary things, that we were like, okay, well, you guys just need to go and get your patios going. Because remember, people couldn't even go in restaurants, so the patios became their square footage, and it was, on the shoulder seasons, something needed to happen, or else the restaurant was basically going to shut down.
They wanted to enclose them.
Yeah, it was
Oh,
just
yeah,
a
yeah, it
whole
was-
thing, right? And so I think we kind of just backed off on trying to, like, if we were designing the new, like we are now, when we had more time and it wasn't such a crisis, I think we would have been much more prescriptive. But we were kind of like, man, restaurants just need the space. And so it kind of unleashed it. But I remember Councillor Lugber, you were quite concerned about this explosion of fossil fuel heaters around town because of this. You made a lot of mention of that.
So it's unfortunate that 3 of you in the room weren't members of council at that time, but I do remember it was a significant debate that we had around them. And then there was, and I mean, even during that COVID time, so even before you guys joined council, we had sort of further debate about whether or not we were going to be allowing patios all winter, because lots of places do accommodate outdoor, and that just never really went. Like, so people, like, that just never happened. But, you go to Europe or you go to a ski resort and you're sitting outside in January while it's snowing on you underneath a gas heater. Like, I mean that does occur in places. So it was a robust discussion that happened in 2020, and then further discussion as we kept trying to work with this bylaw. So, and it was brought up by Councillor Lockenberg at that time in terms of the use of these heaters. So it was thoroughly discussed, and it's one of those things where one council discusses something and the next council is sort of not party to all of the discussions that went on. So anyway, so we've got that moved and seconded. I see no further questions. All those in favor? And that carries. Okay, there we go. And we are on to, thank you very much,
Yeah, thank you, Sebastian.
Sebastian. Oh, no, you don't get to go. Sorry. Sorry, there's 12D here.
No, I just want to say thank you for that very wholesome discussion on sidewalk patios.
What would you talk about if I wasn't here?
Oh my goodness.
Guess we're gonna find out.
Yeah,
Okay, and 12D, rezoning application 655 Highway 3A. The Villa Motel located at 655 Highway 3A has applied to amend the official community plan bylaw, the zoning bylaw, and the off-street parking and landscape bylaw. These amendments aim to allow the development of a recreational vehicle campground as a specific use within the C2 service commercial zone alongside its existing motel operations. The applicant is seeking the following amendments: one to the official plan, one to the zoning bylaw, and one to the off-street parking and landscape bylaw. Staff are recommending that the council deny the application and not proceed with the bylaw at this time. So as you know, we debated this at the last business meeting, and the request was to ask for it to come back. And here it is before us again. And I'm gonna go to staff first.
I was just gonna move the.
Oh, okay. Well, staff, do you have a report? I mean, we've heard the report one time before. Is there anything further you'd like to add, or?
Yeah, I think we've got a quick presentation, but if council kind of remembers the gist of the application, you know, it's a villa motel, and they're essentially they're looking at, since there's been an unfortunate fire and they lost the building, and they've rethought about what they wanted to do with that area, and essentially is to create, you know, kind of a mix, maintain the main motel, but also create some RV parking spaces, to a number of, a total of 7 RV parking spaces. Really that would just require kind of leveling and re-landscaping and doing some retaining. So a bit of a cut and fill operation to create those flat spaces, to create those RV spaces. As presented previous time, staff had certain concerns around, you know, a number of things around, you know, it's an entrance to the city. So, you know, it's always hard to say with these plans, like what would this ultimately like visually look like. We had some feasibility concern around some turning radiuses and things like that. And, you know, we're talking to the applicant around addressing that via, you know, limiting RV sizes. Some concerns, although unlikely, it's not impossible that, you know, there'd be some switching to long-term housing, but the applicant again has provided a package around talking to the, you know, some other colleagues in the association around how to avoid those things. And, you know, from a land, I think, you know, it kind of boils down from a land use perspective. Nelson is a fairly dense urban environment. We're not, you know, a huge population, but we're pretty built out. So, one, does it make sense to have additional camping amenities within our built environment? And if so, then maybe it's a bigger conversation than, you know, an ad hoc rezoning around, you know, what, like if this one moves forward, you know, what does the next one look like? Is this something we would want to see kind of happen in other areas of the city, or would we allow other similar businesses that have large potential parking areas to allow for RVs? So from a planning perspective, it's, you know, it's just a bit harder to deal with these ad hoc requests. And I think, you know, some of the policies around like in our OCP to explore for additional campgrounds in the municipality, I think from my opinion is that, you know, we probably looked at what a campground was, you know, like a mix of RVs and tents in some sort of a nature setting, or, you know, probably weren't thinking about, okay, like more RV spaces in a more kind of urban commercial environment, which this is. So I think at the end of the day, that's where staff had, you know, a certain level of, you know, we couldn't get to feeling excessively comfortable with this, and feeling that it did meet the intent of the OCP. And essentially that's why, you know, at this point in time, we had recommended denial of the rezoning, and council asked us to bring it forward. So we crafted some draft bylaws for council to consider. And if council wants to move this to, you know, to the next step, which is the public hearing, which would allow the applicant to address council, would allow members of the community to address council, whether they're in favor or against this. So that would So that would be required before holding the public hearing. There needs to be, at least one reading of the bylaws to kind of establish that process. So, that's kind of where we're at. I believe the applicant has, addressed some of the concerns that were discussed at council last time in his package, and was added.
Councillor Lockhart.
I'd like to move the staff recommendation.
Okay, and is there a seconder? Councillor Tate, Councillor Lockenberg, if you don't mind.
That staff be directed to not proceed with rezoning applications submitted by the owner of 655 Highway 3A and inform the owner that the application is denied.
Councillor Lockenberg, as the mover, do you wish to speak to it?
Yeah, I thought about this. I was on the fence the last time it came around, and then spent more time in the interim thinking about it and visiting the property. And the clarity for me came when I considered that when you're doing an OCP amendment, it's because the OCP is preventing the highest and best use of that land. And so you want to do that amendment to achieve or to accommodate the highest and best use. And I don't think this qualifies as the highest and best use. There's so many more things that I can imagine that could be accomplished on this land. So if we're going to amend the OCP, which affects more than the property owner, it affects that neighborhood, the quality of the neighborhood, it affects every driver and cyclist and who are going to be passing by the Villa Motel, then it really needs to meet that high bar to justify it. And I think clearly it doesn't, and I think staff has made that clear as well. So I will be voting.
Councillor Pinero.
Yeah, I mean, I remember the debate last time, and I read through all of it as well since, and it does seem to me that the applicant is meeting. I'm a little bit confused about the sort of the resistance to it, I guess, because it seems like they're meeting a lot of the concerns, like the turning radius of the vehicles, for example. I think, that's already like sports teams show up in buses at that property and seem to get in there no problem. The long-term housing thing, I'm not an expert at it by any means, but it seems to me like there's no more risk of it turning into long-term housing than if someone were to refuse to leave their hotel room at the end of the day, and stay in there. It's a hotel at the end of the day, and they're up. It's their responsibility to figure that out. And then the gateway to the city thing, I was thinking about it, and like, we have 3 gateways to the city, and at least one of them is a used car lot and a abandoned house with Crack Shack painted on the side of it. I mean, it doesn't seem to affect tourism that much. It seems like people just need to get to town and they don't care that. I mean, anecdotally, I don't know what the effect on tourism is of that particular gateway, but it seems well traveled. I don't really understand the resistance, because I feel like at the end of the day, it's just an extension of a hotel. It's a hotel in a different manner, as it were. It seems like it would be utilized, and I understand, I think from a hotel perspective, the cost of building a new building as a hotel, or the cost of renting out land that you own for somebody with their own sort of structure, I can understand why they would want that. So I don't quite get what the sticking point is, and I ask the question respectfully because I know you guys are very good at what you do, but none of those reasons seem that glaring. So whether it's just like a combination of all 3 or what it is, and you did speak to sort of the knock-on effect of the decision or what have you, but I don't know how many other, it's hard to imagine how many other situations this would sort of engender. I'm not.
Yeah, and I think, you bring a lot of good points, Councillor. And I think, in some cases, we bring a recommendation. In some cases, it seems, we've got tons of policies that support this. In other cases, like, oh, this is, had we actually contemplated this? Probably not. And does this still meet the intent of the OCP? Is this something, you know, we want to see? And this is kind of, in my opinion, falls in that zone, right? It's kind of, oh, okay, like, we're doing a quasi campground, or, you know, like quite different than, you know, maybe what a, you know, we imagine a campground to look like. So, and I think, you know, yeah, there's certain concerns around, you know, the aesthetics, the land use of the area. But I think, to me, what sums it up is, it just, we are the opinion that through the OCP, this was just not contemplated. And if we want to entertain it, there's two ways of doing it. We can go with, you know, one off as a test piece and learn from it. Or we can kind of say, well, you know what, we'd like to look at this bigger picture, and, you know, what kind of standards do we need to put in place? Like, oh, they need to be a certain size, they need to have this, they need to have that. Right now we have nothing, right? We're just kind of going on the research from the applicant, not to discredit him in any ways. So, you know, it almost becomes like a kind of a test piece, so to speak. And so I think that is kind of a way to sum it up. And, you know, we bring these conversations to council because there's a lot more, you know, heads to think about it, and you know, we have that conversation. So I don't know if it necessarily clearly answers your question, but that's kind of our thought process with this file. It's just not a kind of clear-cut thing that we were expecting. And throughout the process, I think, you know, there was a lot of questions that came up, and there are still a few that we would, should this move forward, that we still need to work with the applicant to figure out on about, like, you know, on how all of this will work. So, yeah, and you know, in the absence of, you know, wanting to make a kind of a decision today, we can go through the public hearing and let the community talk about it and get more feedback from that way.
Can I get a supplemental, maybe?
Sure. I do have a few people. I've got Councillor Woodward and
Can I just
Councillor Tate.
add to what Sebastian said there? I think one of the you know, things that our staff look at is what's the long-term vision for the community. So I agree, some of those gateways aren't what we want them to be today, but we're planning for the future. And hopefully that one entranceway at some point will be cleaned up, and, you know, that's certainly not our vision of how you enter our city. So so that's always our lens, and we do that with everything. There may not be we may build a block of sidewalk, but the vision is there will be sidewalks and people say, why would you just build one block of sidewalk? Well, because we want sidewalks, you know, in this whole street eventually, and that's the way you get there. So we're always looking at what we're trying to achieve long-term, and sometimes short-term doesn't necessarily, you know, feel like we're, you know, it doesn't make sense, maybe short-term, but longer-term, that's where we're trying to get to. So that's a lens that they look at as well, because we do want these gateways. The downtown waterfront plan talked about these gateways into our community. So just wanted to just make sure that what is there today doesn't necessarily mean that's what we see down the future, or your planning documents do. So that's a lens they always have to bring to the table.
Councillor Carroll, your supplemental.
Sure. So definitely hear you there, and I would just, I guess my feeling about it, my gut here is that, well, we didn't, like, obviously this sort of took the planning department by surprise, as it were. So it's a unknown, and that can be a bit nerve-wracking. I'm sure I think ideally what I would like to see, though, in general, is that our city, you know, does its best to support its citizens in times of that, you know, in unforeseen circumstances and uncertainty. And I imagine that they didn't plan on burning their building down either. So that being an uncertain and fairly catastrophic event for any business, that's a lens or a consideration for me anyway, in a sense that we don't know that it's going to turn out terribly. We don't know that it's going to turn out well, but as a test case and as a learning tool for the future, like there's nothing to say that we couldn't, if it doesn't work out, we can always make sure it never happens again. But in this particular situation, it just seems like those people, they're undergoing their own sort of unforeseen circumstances, and it's just behooves a good city council to factor that in. So I would ask that we at least hear what the public has to say about it at the very least, and go from that. And if there's a resounding no, then that's what we're here for. We're here to support the public will, as it were. So that's my 2 cents.
Councillor Woodward, and then Councillor Tate.
Thank you. So I was very much on the fence the last time. And, staff has brought it back, and I think I have to capitulate. It's, of course, staff in the planning department are far more knowledgeable of this kind of undertaking than I will ever be. And I put an immense amount of trust in our staff. I know they work very hard to move this town forward. And I would say I've thought about this a lot. It's been churning around in my head. I've gone to the site. I've looked at the site a couple of times. And I think the one thing that really gets me is there's two things. There's two things, actually. One is that the precedent we're setting, if we move forward, and as Councillor Lockenberry said, RVs are not a good land use, because you could put a lot more on where 7 RVs are parked. So that's one, the precedent. And yeah, number 2 was the actual land use. Seems to me like everything we're trying to do in this town in the last bunch of years and moving forward is trying to have best use land policy. And this just feels kind of like it's a quick fix, but it will be there a long time. Once it's done, and that is what it is for 20 years or whatever, long time. So I feel like I'm very hesitant on this from my end. So thank you for listening.
Councillor Tate.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I think I agree that it's precedent setting, and I really appreciate the amount of work that's gone into this. I went over it a lot as well. In particular, it occurred to me that questions that come to council have to be approached without prejudice, and I had noticed some letters of support that indicated that the proponent is like well-respected and a good and tidy neighbor, which is awesome. But anyone can come with this proposal, and we can't make a decision based on the proponent's reputation. So I think that's really important to keep in mind. I noticed 2 arguments in the documentation. One was that it could be RV recreational camping. And so I looked for other similar establishments around. I saw one in Fruitvale. I saw one in Erickson. I looked at one in Yack, and I looked at one on Highway 3 west of Salmo there. So all of these are like family-owned hotels that also have an RV camping component. And they had some common features. One of them was a physical separation from the highway. One of them was a structural barrier. In most cases, the hotel itself was a barrier, and in some cases, there was like a fence. Mature trees and greenery, creating like you said, like a park-like setting. And both of those things combined provide like a noise barrier and privacy. And like this proposal, as we see it, doesn't have any of these elements. So I'm not persuaded by the argument that it's recreational camping. So the other argument that I saw was for accommodation for people working in trades. And so I really poured through the 51 pages. So on one of the, and I have a list. On page 9, it was described as up to 3 months. On page 13, it was described as up to 30 nights. On page 38, the proponent states having tradespeople as guests up to 12 months. And on page 48, there's a letter from a supporter who stated they were there as a long-term guest and stayed for 2 months. Okay, so I thought about this a lot. So we used to have this apartment building that had 3 2-bedrooms and 6 single units. And the report says that RVs aren't designed for winter habitation. They're not suitable for long-term residential habitation. Like, RVs don't have the same durability in materials, insulation, design, as like permanent bricks and mortar buildings. And then I think about the housing climate that we are in. And if council sets this precedent and asserts that an RV is functionally equivalent or a suitable substitute for permanent kitchenette suites, I think it would be irresponsible. And with those 2 arguments in this documentation, I can't support this land use. So that's where I'm at.
Councillors, is there any further discussion on this motion? Councillor Payne.
I just want to weigh in on the detract from visual appeal. From what I've seen so far, I didn't understand that. I think we're hearing a lot lately about how Nelson is being gentrified, and this would seem to be the opposite of that type of sentiment, that you can't drive into a town that presents as the first thing having to me, a tourist accommodation, recreational campground, whatever. That doesn't say to me this is a bad place to go or unattractive. That just wasn't a message that I got from that. So that being visually unappealing wasn't an argument for me. The turning radius was another one. I'm just going with the points that were on there. If MODI, the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure, said the turning radius was okay, they said that was fine, right? Did I read that in there, or did I make it up?
You read that.
Yeah. Then that's okay with me, because they understand the highways, and it doesn't sound like there's going to be any more traffic than what's there now. Interestingly enough, I have just thoroughly enjoyed listening to all of the points as we've gone around the room, because what a diverse and incredible opportunity it is to hear that variety of perspectives. I do agree with Councillor Pinheiro on this, that I would like the public to weigh in on it, to get their deeper understanding and perspective around it before making a decision myself, because interestingly enough, I do understand the precedent-setting concept around this, but in a housing crisis, I lived in a recreational vehicle with my 4 children for a year and a half. That was the only option I had. So to say to someone that we're not going to offer this option, and we should, I don't know how we encourage the owner to build something that we know is building here is unaffordable unless you have assistance from different levels of government. So it seems to me that I'm not encouraging that people would live there, but if our campground here in the summertime is full and we have spots close by, so you don't have to drive back and forth to Kokanee to camp, or as my family did, drove into town to find a place to live in the next community we'd chosen to be in, where we stayed at that campground for 3 weeks until we were able to locate that. I don't see an issue with it. And as far as the permanence for 20 years, I think that's the beauty of this. Both the owner and the community can determine these things can wheel up and go. If it's not working for the owner, they're not going to keep it going at a loss. They're going to look for the next creative solution for that property. We don't know what it's going to be like in 20 years. I also totally respect the highest and best land use. But if the owner decides that this isn't going to work, then is a park, is a vacant space what it is right now? Is that a better, higher and better land use for that? I don't know if we can house 7 people or 7 couples or some tradesmen to come in and help us build the homes that we need. I would probably go in that direction. But I think this is a case where we have so many questions that having the community weigh in is not a bad thing.
Councillors, any further discussion? Seeing none, we have a recommendation on the table. It's been moved and seconded, and so I'll call for the vote. All those in favor of that, should I read this again? Everybody knows what we're voting on?
Can you read it again, Mayor?
That the staff be directed to not proceed with the rezoning application submitted by the owner of 655 Highway 3A and inform the owner that the application is denied. So, once again, all those in favor of the recommendation and those opposed, and that carries. I want to thank everybody for their time and their thoughtfulness around this proposal that came forward, and to thank staff for their time on it. I think we've had 2 good sessions of discussion on this issue, so thank you for that. And moving on, we have no recommendations from staff. We have no, on item 14, we have minutes. If somebody would like to move the minutes for
Move.
receipt, been moved by Councillor Woodward, seconded by Councillor Lockenberg. Anybody see anything there that they needed to pull out? Okay, and in that case, all those in favor of the minutes? Okay, thank you, and that passes. And then we have reports, again, for information. If I could only get my agenda opened again. So, a mover for the reports.
Move.
And is there a seconder on reports?
Second.
Seconded by Councillor Tate. Any discussion or questions about the reports? Councillor Woodward.
Just a comment on the amount of money we give to Fortis. It's 1.3 million. It's quite amazing, and so you could really see there, like,
Peak power.
Councillor Payne
Peak power.
talks about as getting more efficient and using less. Really, actually, this has this direct linkage to what we have to buy. So it was, I mean, it's a startling number to see, but this is, again, I really want to say this is great having this box here for plus 25,000 items. So thank you for doing that.
It's not give, Councillor Woodward, it's pay.
It's purchase. I know, but it's a stunning amount. Thank
Give
you.
them money, they give us power.
I know.
It's a trade.
Burning sticks.
Yes, but then again, that it goes to show that when we think about those times of trying to use the things off of peak time, does have some overall benefit to all of the systems. I mean, we ask people to do that, but some people, possibly can't do that for any number of reasons. But for those that can, it's very helpful, and then we all benefit at the end of the
Yes.
of the day. And so the only other thing there is just a little bit about discretionary funds, just to make it transparent that I will be attending the Council Forest Industries Annual Convention this week, and I will be using discretionary funds that are available to council members.
And
Councillor Payne.
I'm also registered in the BC Heritage, which I don't think is on there. BC Heritage
no,
Conference?
no.
Is that?
Yeah, that should
happen
go on there,
after?
because,
Okay.
yeah. So we'll just, there you go. Is anybody else going to the Heritage Conference that's registered to attend? Okay.
Still some spots. Going
Yeah.
fast.
It's just really it's just for transparency, the fact that we have a little running list there.
But not the amounts.
There's no notice of motions, there's no late items, and so I'd like to have a resolution closing the meeting to the public, and that in the opinion of the council, that the public interest requires that persons other than members of council and staff and any approved audiences be excluded from this meeting, and that the meeting of council continue under section 91C regarding labor relations and other employee relations. Moved by Councillor Payne, seconded by Councillor Woodward. All those in favor? Thank you. And we'll have a moment to stand up and stretch while Bill packs up. Thank you for attending tonight's meeting, Bill.